Chapter 1002. 10 minutes later, in the meeting room of Underworld Frontline. We've collected some interesting data. Fong Bujua sat at the table and read the words on the screen. At this time, his 4 teammates were also sitting around the conference table, watching the game they were interested in on their respective projection screens. What's wrong? Regulation and Hyodiai's match is over? Ruoyu heard her brother Bujue and turned to ask. Even though the winner hasn't been decided yet, the situation is pretty clear. Fong Bujue replied. Sashimi was taken care of by Ming Nan's trio. Atobi was defeated by Lying Drunk. Understanding Death and Lying Drunk were defeated by Dianli Wang, and Samontier was injured by Phantom Dawn. He thought about it and added, I believe Dianli Wang will have to run after fighting with Phantom Dawn for a while. After that, it will be Phantom Dawn and Ming Nan's trio. Then, Ruoyu paused for half a second before asking, what do you think the result will be? Fong Bujue chuckled lightly. Then, of course, it will be Regulation 1 that will win. I say. Hearing that, Hua Jian could not help but turn to interject. Is it really okay for you to use such a matter-of-fact tone? Then why did you help Hyodiai before the match? I did not do anything for Hyodiai. Fong Bujue denied Hua Jian's statement. My plan was mainly for my own personal benefit. As for Hyodiai, I just happened to hitch a ride. They effortlessly gained a powerful influence during the match, and I borrowed their power to get what I wanted. He paused. Information. So, from the beginning, you didn't think Hyodiai would win. Xiao Ling joined the conversation. Yes, Fong Bujue replied calmly. Actually, I don't think that the Ice Empress would have a chance of winning even if the team that hitched a ride with me was the gods. Hey, Wang Tanji, who was sitting opposite Brother Ju, chimed in. That's too much, isn't it? According to what you said, isn't the First Order team invincible? That's not true. Fong Bujue shook his head. Regulation Team 1 is not invincible, but in terms of individual combat ability, Phantom Dawn can be considered invincible. According to what you said, wouldn't the other teams have no chance at all? Ruoyu said, let's all pray that we don't meet the first team before the finals and fight for second place. I didn't say that. Fong Bujue replied. In my opinion, there is no one who cannot be defeated, including myself. Of course, dealing with a monster like Phantom Dawn required some planning and preparation. What happened today was part of that preparation. Understood. Xiao Ling nodded. You want to push him to his limit in this scenario, don't you? No. Fong Bujue's answer almost slipped out of his lips. It's not? Xiao Ling's eyes widened. No. Fong Bujue repeated the answer and explained, to push Phantom Dawn to his limit, we have to have a fighting power equal to the 4 pillars of divinity. Those below that level, like the Guardian, the Jury, or the Undead 9, we need at least 4 of them. He placed his elbow on the table and held his chin with one hand. Regarding the players, those at Drunken Dreams level, we might have a chance if we have 7 or 8 of them. He paused for a few seconds before continuing. In any case, with the 4 from Frost Empress, Dianhai King, and Samontier, it's impossible to push Phantom Dawn to his limit unless the other 3 from Regulation Team 1 refuse to help and watch the 6 of them fight Phantom Dawn. Xiao Tan was confused again. The power comparison that you mentioned is based on Phantom Dawn at his peak, right? But today, he's fighting inside the magic circle set up by Phantom Church, right? He shouldn't have been able to unleash his full power. That magic circle is not as powerful as you think. Fong Bujue replied. The magic circle that I had Samontier set up is mainly used to weaken the player's summoning skills and sorcery weapons. He titled his head and said, but these 2 skills are limited, and they don't affect Phantom Dawn that much. Other than that, based on my observation, not long before Dianhai King showed up, Phantom Dawn already noticed the effect of the magic circle, so until now, he hasn't used those 2 skills. Then, what's the point of this test? Hua Qian asked. Is your real goal to trick Frost Empress? How is that possible? Fong Bujue pointed at the screen before him. Without my help, would Frost Empress have been able to make Regulation Team 1 lose 3 members when only Atobi died? At this point, Brother Ju placed both of his elbows on the table. Then he crossed his fingers and placed both of his hands in the middle of the table. With regards to the meaning of this test of mine, isn't it clear enough? He assumed the stance of a commanding general and said with a smile, I want to see Phantom Dawn's most basic and strongest ability, fighting mastery. Several seconds after hearing that, Xiaotan nodded with some thought. Now that you mention it, I suddenly realize, in the previous matches, Phantom Dawn has been relying on his summoned creatures to fight. Yes, Xiaoling added. Just based on the videos of his matches in Phase 2, he looks like a summoner. Humph! Brother Ju scoffed. That is because the kid has already run out of opponents who are worthy of his attention in the field of fighting. He licked his lips. Personally, I believe that during Phase 1, there were only 5 participants who could compete with Phantom Dawn in fighting. 7 kills, Meng Jingchan, lying drunk, asking the heavens, and Xiaotan. Huh? Wang Tanji gasped when he heard that. Me? He paused for a second. And you're not included? That's normal. Feng Bujue replied calmly. Fighting is also a matter of talent, and obviously, I don't have that talent. He sat up straight and opened his arms. Even now, my fighting mastery has reached level S, but that doesn't mean that I'm a fighting expert. Then, he glanced at Ruoyu and then turned to Xiaotan. If we have the same physical fitness level, and we fight barehanded with the same weapon, I definitely won't be a match for you and Ruoyu. Oh, Xiaotan scratched his chin. So that's how it works. Yes, Feng Buju added, but unfortunately of the 5 that I listed, 2 of them are Phantom Dawn's teammates, and asking the heavens is slightly weaker than the other 4 of you, so he tapped the table lightly with his index finger. Now, of the 5, only you and 7 kills can compete with Phantom Dawn in fighting. At this point, he waved his finger. Of course, that's not counting Ruoyu. Including her, there are 3 of us. I think I get it now. Ruoyu, who had been silent for a long time, spoke again. She turned to look at her brother Bujue and said, The purpose of today's setup and your plan? I have a general idea. Hee, I've guessed it as well, Xiaoling quickly added. But Xiaotan and Huajian still did not get it. They asked with confusion, What is it? Feng Bujue smiled and replied, That is, at the same time, in another scenario, boom. After a loud boom, a tall building collapsed. If one observed it from afar, one would notice that this building that was over 40 stories high was cut in half from the middle. The cut was very straight and flat. In the first few seconds of the collapse, the whole upper half of the building was sliding sideways. Cough, 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 cough. Not long after, in the thick smoke of the ruins, there was a few coughs. Then, the coughing man jumped more than 10 meters into the air and landed on the rooftop of a nearby building. I think I went a bit overboard. After standing still, Oda AI sheathed her katana and muttered to herself. As she finished speaking, there were 3 sounds of ta-da. 3 light figures landed a few meters behind her. I told you to control your strength. Yusuji Hito was the first to speak. You do this every time. I'm too lazy to complain. Takeda Tomo followed. You freakishly strong woman. Aren't you complaining already? Oda AI turned around and gave Takeda Tomo a dead fish look. Takeda Tomo did not want to be outdone. He pulled his face with both hands and made a face. Okay, we're in the middle of a match. Stop fooling around. Among the 4 of them, Mizuki Shin, who was the calmest, spoke up. AI, you really have to be careful in the future. If you don't care about the battle environment, it's tantamount to giving the opponent a chance to escape through the smoke. That's right. Takeda Tomo immediately agreed. Now, there's only one person left. In this situation, you will definitely escape. How troublesome would it be to find him? You don't have to worry about this. Oda AI said and shifted her gaze back to the smoke under her feet. Although I'm not familiar with this person, I know he will never escape. Takeda Tomo was stunned for a moment. Then he laughed a few times. What are you thinking? She ran to the edge of the rooftop and pointed at the pile of ruins below. Is there a fool who knows that all his teammates are dead and still wants to fight 1 against 4? Bang! Before she finished speaking, There was a muffled sound in the smoke. Then, a figure leaped up from the ground and flew through the air. 2 seconds later, the figure landed steadily on the railing at the edge of the rooftop and stood on the iron pole with his chest puffed out and his head raised. The person was dressed in a white Pegasus sacred robe. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes. His aura was intimidating. His presence gave people the feeling that he had his own background music. Takeda Tomy, almost rolled her eyes when she saw this scene. She instinctively let out a strange groan and said, "What is this guy doing?" Even the calmer Mizuki Shin and Yusuji Hito were shocked. Both of them muttered in their hearts, "What's going on? Did he not notice that we're here? What is he trying to do? Does he have a trump card that will take him down with us?" "Ha ha ha! The red-haired one. You're doing well." Flying Pegasus had his arms crossed in front of his chest. As he spoke, he waved his arm and looked at Oda AI as if there was no one around. "It's my turn now. Do you think this is a turn-based game?" Takeda Tomo, who was standing closest to him, immediately complained. She raised her hand and was about to hit him with her weapon. "Okay." Unexpectedly, Oda AI, who was not far away, immediately responded in a loud voice. "None of you should make a move. I want to defeat him alone." "Hey, are you going to be as stupid as this idiot?" Takeda Tomo suddenly turned around and shouted at her teammate. "This is an idiot who jumped in front of the four of them alone and put on a defenseless look, ready to fight to the death." When Takeda Tomo complained, it was obvious that she still intended to attack Xiaoma. But the next second, she suddenly saw Mizuki Shin shaking his head at her from afar and giving her a look. At that moment, Takeda Tomo thought for a while and seemed to understand something. Then, she stopped talking and retreated to the side. "Are we really not going to help?" 2 seconds later, Yusuji Hito lowered her voice and said to Mizuki Shin beside her, "This is a good opportunity, Hito." Mizuki Shin also whispered back, "Don't forget, the opponent is the champion of S1 for the best." Yusuji Hito heard this and her expression changed slightly. "So that's how it is?" She immediately understood the meaning of her teammate. "Let our Sengoku's trump card defeat the champion of S1 in a duel." "That's right." Mizuki Shin continued. "Although Flying Pegasus is not recognized as the strongest player, the title of champion is not empty. Killing him under siege and defeating him in a duel, the meaning is very different." While they were talking, the battle on the other side had already begun. Take this. Flying Pegasus, in accordance with his usual style, before he made a move, he must first inform the opponent and then report the name of the move. So, everyone, I think you have already guessed that the skill that Xiao Ma will use is naturally that. Flying Pegasus Meteor Punch. With a shout, the shadow of the fist moved quickly. Flying Pegasus's two fists moved continuously. The silver-white fist was like a torrential wave, surging violently. All attacked Oda AI. When Oda AI spoke, her right hand had already grasped the handle of the katana on her left waist. "Whether it's the game video, or just now, is this the only move you've used?" When she said the last two words, her tone became a roar, and the katana in her hand was also unsheathed. Chapter 1003. He's so tenacious that it's touching. I didn't expect him to last so long. After all, he's the champion of S1, although he's just an idiot. While saying these words, the members of Sengoku First Team have been watching Sky Steed and Oda AI fight for a full 5 minutes. In daily life, 5 minutes was not a long time. Making noodles, brushing teeth, taking out the trash, shaving. It would take this much time to do anything. But in the game world, in a high-tempo battle, 5 minutes was enough for two players to fight back and forth 100 times. It's getting more and more annoying. At this time, Oda AI's face was obviously angry. "Are you really a cockroach that can't be killed?" "Oof." Sky Steed's legs trembled, barely supporting his body, and confronted his opponent. "I'm the only one left in our team. I bear the expectations of all my partners. How can I fall so easily?" "Hey, what do you mean by easy?" Takeda Tomo listened to Sky Steed's words and couldn't help but complain. "No matter how you look at it, you should have fallen a long time ago, okay? Indeed, I kind of want to cheer for him." Yusuji Hito said with a serious face. Oh, hearing this sentence, Akinabu couldn't help but smile. So you like this type? No. Yusuji Hito's expression changed slightly, and she replied honestly, I just think that people who are serious are worth encouraging. She paused for half a second and continued, although he's an idiot. Yeah. Takeda Tomo and Akinabu immediately shook their heads in unison and said, what an idiot. A few seconds later, Sky Steed roared again, and his fighting spirit was blazing. At this point in the battle, Brony was already covered in wounds, and even the holy robe on his body was badly damaged, but there was no trace of fear or exhaustion in his eyes. There was only a high fighting spirit and hot blood in his eyes. Phew, I'm so angry. Oda AI, on the other hand, was breathing heavily at this moment, and the hand holding the sword began to tremble slightly. I've already said I want to defeat him alone, but the battle is still not over. It's too ugly. At this moment, Oda AI, who had the advantage, became the anxious party. Sky Steed's incredible courage and determination was something she had never seen in any battle. In fact, before today, she thought people like Sky Steed did not exist in the real world, but there were a lot of them in manga. I've decided. Suddenly, Oda AI shouted loudly, her posture, her sword, Sky Steed, Sky, Sky, Sky Steed, Sky Steed, Sky Steed, Steed, Sky Steed, Sky, Sky, Sky Steed, Steed. As soon as the statement, Sky, 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 Sky Test, Sky, SS Sky, 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 AI. Don't be impulsive, Akechi Shin reminded her loudly from behind. If you say that move for Captain. Oda AI interrupted him and turned her head slightly, revealing a ferocious look on her face. Please don't say any more. The next second, her teammates fell silent. When they saw Oda AI's expression, they had already given up the idea of dissuading her. They would rather let Oda AI use that skill willfully here than risk angering her further by causing her to go berserk. Oof. Sky Steed saw the other party's reaction and shouted back, come at me if you can. After that, he stretched his body and punched again, Sky Steed's meteor punch. Sky Steed only used one move, but his actual combat skills were definitely not as simple as they seemed. Perhaps many people had forgotten that Sky Steed was already ranked 20th in the player's combat strength ranking when S1 began. Moreover, he was not a VIP player. He relied on his own strength to fight his way through the preliminaries all the way to the finals. If Sky Steed was really a brainless meteor punch guy, he would have been eliminated a long time ago. Looking at it from another perspective, a player who only used one active skill from the beginning to the end and could compete with those high-level players on the same stage and not be at a disadvantage. Even if he could not be called a genius, he could at least be called a freak. This kind of miraculous feat could not be done without extraordinary combat intuition and combat IQ. Right now, Heavenly Steed soaring through the skies had clearly seen through the flaw in the opponent's trump card and decisively launched another round of attacks. If it was someone else who used the skill, Sky Steed's Meteor Punch, it would be similar every time. However, Sky Steed's Meteor Punch, every round and every punch could be controlled at a very low level. Take this attack, for example. 80% of the punches only had the basic damage of the skill itself. However, 20% of the punches were imbued with extremely powerful Do-Chi. As for the remaining 20% of the punches, under the cover of a large number of punches, they all flew towards the flaws in Oda AI's stance. Damn it! Oda AI was preparing her attack, but she was hit hard. Without looking, she knew that her life points were dropping rapidly. I've underestimated him. At this moment, other than anger in her heart, there was also admiration. To be able to use such a simple skill to its maximum potential. Looks like he is not just an idiot. This respect quickly allowed her to regain some clarity and also stabilized her slightly trembling posture. Originally, Oda AI might not have been able to use the skill successfully, but after she regained her composure, she successfully resisted the attack of Meteor Punch and activated her killer move. Name: One Sword Stream, Aido, Lion's Song Skill card property. Active skill, disappears after one use. Skill type. Fighting effect. Draw the sword and slash the enemy. Can only be activated with a long sword or sword. Consumption. 40% of maximum stamina points. Learning requirement. Level 40, Fighting Mastery Embark. Only a swordsman with a high level of comprehension can learn this Iato skill. The skill is as fast as lightning, hard to see, and can cut through steel like mud. But the two figures crossed, and the blade flashed. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Victory and defeat had already been decided in this instant. Pooh! The heavenly steed fell down. Before his blood could spread, he had already turned into white light and disappeared. Did I win? Oda AI mumbled with a dazed gaze. 2 seconds later, she seemed to notice something. She lowered her head to look at the left side of her chest and saw a bloody hole. I see. Oda AI chuckled weakly. Changing the trajectory of your punch at the moment you were hit by my attack, and using the momentum of my attack to counterattack. She shook her head. What an idiot! As she said that, she collapsed and dissolved into white light. Then, in another scenario, the match between Red Sakura Team 1 and Regulation Team 2 was still ongoing. At this time, the winner between Regulation Team 1 and Hyodiai's team had been decided. The result was as Fong Bujua predicted. Regulation Team 1 won in the end. Underworld Frontline and Sengoku Team 1 also won their own battles. Therefore, this battle before them became the last battle that had not ended yet. On top of a huge mountain made of solid ice, a chaotic battle between 6 people was unfolding. Fearless Champion held a long spear and worked together with Invincible Champion, who was wearing a pair of boxing gloves. They attacked Su Huaishang furiously. Even though it was 1 versus 2, Su Huaishang had 2 swords in her hands. She was not at a disadvantage in the battle. On the other side, Red Sakura's Blood Rose stood on a giant eagle and chased after Regulation's leaf paper. The latter was fighting and retreating at the same time. There was almost no room for retaliation. Thankfully, there was a 6th person covering her. To be exact, it was not a person but a snowman with long fur. This NPC was naturally the influence that leaf paper had obtained in the scenario. It was equivalent to a free summon that had no time limit. In the previous scenario, this snowman had given Regulation Team 2 a great advantage. The reason they were able to fight 3 versus 2 was because this snowman had provided them with a surprise attack at the beginning of the battle. But Red Sakura, who had only 2 players left, did not fall into a disadvantage. Even though Red Cherry's side had 1 more casualty than the opposing side, the 2 players who were killed were support-type players. Su Huaishang and Bloody Rose, who were stronger in individual combat, were able to survive unscathed. Furthermore, the Red Cherry Blossom Squad had also borrowed influence. However, this influence was not a summon creature, but a buff-type, invisible resource. On the other hand, on the side of Order Team 2, although they still had 3 members and a snowman, the one that was killed just so happened to be the main force of the team. Moreover, it was the strongest shooting player in the entire Order Studio, Barcode. If this was in the past, an expert like Barcode would have been able to join the first team, but this year Regulation Team 1's lineup was too good. Even one of the 4 from Drunken Dream had to be a substitute, so Barcode had no choice but to be relegated to the second team. In terms of ability, he was a man who had entered the top 50 during round S1. Of course, he did not have the chance to show off in the finals before he was turned into a dead body by loot. But no matter what, compared to the other 3 members of the team, Barcode's skill was undoubtedly the best. Unfortunately, his experience was the same as in round S1. Before he even showed up, he was killed. He did not even get to say a single line. It was the same treatment as E.T. on show. Other than that, there was the snowman. This NPC's intelligence was very low, even lower than the summoned creatures. This was because summoned creatures with low intelligence, such as dogs, bats, wolves, turkeys, these kinds of creatures could at least be controlled by the summoner's will or command, but this snowman could not. This snowman did not have the ability to communicate with higher-level creatures, and it did not listen to anyone's command. Since it was discovered by Yi Ji, Its mode of action was probably to follow and protect Yi Ji, and it did not care about anything else. As a result, the scene described above occurred. Even though they had the advantage in numbers, without the support of the marksmanship players, Regulation Team 2 could not effectively pressure Su Huaishang and Bloody Rose. Under the premise of having similar specializations, Su Huaishang had no problem dealing with two top-tier players. Bloody Rose was very smart. She kept an eye on the enemy's healer, and by doing this, on one hand, she could prevent Yi Ji from helping her teammates, and on the other hand, she could also restrain the snowman. After all, this monster only had high attack and high HP. It had no anti-air ability or intelligence, so they could do whatever they wanted. Invincible, don't worry. When the battle entered a stalemate, Fearless Champion told his teammate as he fought, "Hold your ground. Don't expose any openings." Invincible Champion understood his teammate's meaning, so he replied as he fought, "Don't worry, I understand." "Humph, you want to drain my stamina, right?" Su Huaishang also calmly joined the conversation between the two. "That's right, that's my plan." Fearless Champion admitted it openly. Since he dared to say it in front of the enemy, it meant that there was nothing to hide about this tactic, and he did not have the energy to hide it anyway. Even if you can achieve a balance in a 1v2 situation, this balance cannot be maintained forever. Invincible Champion picked up where his teammate left off and told Su Huaishang, "There are two of us, so we have to take turns to rest during the battle. We are more relaxed in terms of skill selection and error tolerance." He paused, "But you cannot afford to let your guard down even for a moment." Fearless Champion waved his gun and continued, "To put it simply, in this battle, your stamina points will be depleted faster than ours. If we maintain the current situation, it will be to our advantage." "Huh?" Invincible Champion laughed. "Captain Su, if I were you, I would give up on defense and focus on offense. Who knows, you might be able to take out one of them." As he said that, he took a few steps to the side and threw out 3 punches, or else, when your stamina points are depleted, you won't even have the chance to counterattack. The two of them sang the same tune. Even though it sounded like they were trying to bait the enemy, most of their words were true. But to the fans of Su Huaishang who were watching the live stream, their words were quite grating. "Despicable man, using a battle of attrition. If you're that good, why don't you fight Shang 1v1? What kind of man are you fighting 2 against 1? Since you have the advantage in numbers, you should go first. This is so despicable." Obviously, these were all comments made by die-hard fans. There was nothing wrong with using any kind of strategy in a competition. The members of Regulation would not choose a strategy that was obviously disadvantageous to them just to satisfy the fans of the other team. And this, Su Huaishang knew very well. Both of your suggestions are indeed not bad. After fighting for another 10 seconds, or rather, after thinking for another 10 seconds, Su Huaishang opened her lips to say, "If we continue to drag this out, it will only increase the chance of me losing." Once that was said, the expressions of the two brave hearts shifted. They instantly tensed up and prepared for the next wave of attacks. Then, Su Huaishang did not make them wait for too long. "I will not hold back." Chapter 1004. The moment she finished, the blade shone. Before Su Huaishang even made her move, her two opponents had already taken up a defensive stance. They knew very well that, by the time they saw the skill and reacted, it would already be too late. 2 seconds later, Su Huaishang lowered her body and shifted her center of gravity back. She crossed the 2 blades in her hands and instantly unleashed Northern Sky Cross Phoenix. This skill was an evolved skill. It was evolved from the Grade C fighting skill, Northern Sky Cross Phoenix. Similar changes have been mentioned many times in the previous chapters. For example, Feng Bujue's Hasty Repair later became Not So Hasty Repair. Weary Dream's 1,000 Waves became 10,000 Waves, and Li Ryu's 7 Clear Frost and Burning Snow combined into one to become Double Polar Murder. Other than that, there were skills like Wild Ball Fist and Bright Jade skill that came with their own attributes that could level up. This kind of phenomenon was commonly referred to as skill evolution. In fact, any skill had the potential to evolve. The trigger for a skill to evolve was the frequent and familiar use of the skill. A certain mastery had broken through to grade S. In Thriller Paradise, when a player's level was maxed out and their main mastery had reached grade S, there was basically no room for improvement. But there were many hidden stats that could be improved. For example, self-created skill. At the current stage, there were very few players who could come into contact with this field. For example, Feng Bujue's use of Renkyaku and Soaring Pegasus mastery of Soaring Pegasus Meteor Punch. They had already stepped on the threshold of self-created skill. As long as they took one more step forward, they would be able to step into a vast new world. Of course, to self-create a skill, grade S mastery was indispensable. This hard indicator could also be said to be the dividing line between experts and ordinary people. And Su Huaishang was undeniably an expert, a top-notch expert. Her ability, awareness, mental fortitude, she was no weaker than any of the top male players. If anything, she might even be better. She was now far stronger than when she had activated her soul advent during the Battle of the Butterfly. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, a cross-shaped blade of light shot out from the tip of Su Huaishang's blade and flew towards Fearless Champion and Invincible Champion. These two weren't very fast, but their attack, defense, and reaction abilities were very strong. Since they were already prepared, they naturally chose to defend against that skill. Facing the blazing red slash, the brave one was fearless. He raised his spear and released his Do Chi. The brave one crossed his fists and focused his energy on his Dantian. It didn't take long for the two crossed blades to hit the two players. In that instant, they could faintly hear the terrifying cry of a phoenix. Immediately after, they felt their bodies being surrounded by a chilling aura. Although the temperature on the ice mountain was very low, Brother Invincible and Brother Fearless weren't affected by the cold. This was because level 50 players had a high resistance and adaptability to ambient temperature. Even if they were in an environment of minus 40 degrees Celsius or minus 20 degrees Celsius, they would not lose their life points. However, the discomfort and additional consumption of stamina points from the cold and heat would still be effective. However, after coming into contact with the energy of Northern Heaven Cross Phoenix, the two players felt their bodies freeze and they couldn't move. The two of them reacted almost at the same time. Even though the effect of the skill looked like a burning flame, the essence of the flame was actually the power of extreme frost. If you just watch the recording, after Su Huaishang unleashed the skill, she immediately rushed forward and said, "You'll think this skill is a fire element skill, right?" Humph! Invincible Champion quickly pulled out a bottle of antifreeze from his inventory to remove the frozen status. He then stood in front of his teammate and said, "This is quite unexpected. If we knew it was an ice element skill, we wouldn't have taken it head-on." Screech, screech. Before he even finished, Su Huaishang's swords landed on Invincible Champion's wrists. Ugh! The latter's movement was delayed due to the frozen status. Now that he was forced to block the attack, his body was unsteady. He was knocked back about 10 feet with a grunt. Including the damage from a skill earlier, Invincible Champion had lost 32% of his life points. During the battle earlier, I've already noticed Su Huaishang was not going to give up. She took the opportunity when Invincible Champion was knocked back to launch another barrage of attacks at Fearless Champion who had not yet regained his footing. She forced her opponent to retreat again and again. You have been overly reliant on the information that you have gathered before the battle. It is as if you have already predicted what kind of attack you should receive, what kind of attack you should dodge, and what kind of attack you should break before the battle. She paused for half a second and suddenly changed her movement. She used a nimble, exquisite, and even graceful movement to execute a sideways slash, aiming for the blind spot of her opponent's ribs. This kind of battle tactic is indeed effective and logical when both sides are evenly matched. But once you run into an experienced opponent who is good at improvisation, it will become a double-edged sword. As she spoke, Fearless Champion's ribs were wounded by Su Huaishang, and this was just the beginning. Brother Fearless was different from Brother Invincible. Since he was using a long weapon like a spear, he needed more time to adjust after losing his stance. That was why Invincible Champion, who had been the first to adjust his stance, came over to protect him. Unfortunately, Invincible Champion only lasted for a few seconds before he was knocked back. This gave Su Huaishang the perfect opportunity to kill Fearless Champion. In a battle like this where weapons were used, there was a very crucial element, and that was spacing. In a battle between experts, the opponent would usually be on the defensive and enter a spacing that was advantageous to them. Normally speaking, spacing could be understood as the distance, time, and psychological space required for both parties to attack. To give a few common examples. For example, if you used a guandao to chop someone, then your spacing would be at least 2 meters. If you used a watermelon knife to chop someone, then the ideal spacing would be 2/3 of your arm length plus 30 centimeters. And if you used a small knife to chop someone, then the spacing would be no different from using your own hand to chop someone. In conclusion, every weapon had a spacing that was most suitable for them. If the distance during a battle was longer than the spacing, then the user could only defend and not attack. If the distance was shorter than the spacing, then the power of the weapon and the user would be limited. At that moment, Su Huaishang, who had managed to get to Fearless Champion, had gained an overwhelming advantage in terms of spacing. Fearless Champion, who used a long spear, was unable to attack at such a distance, and his hands were tied when he was defending. Furthermore, Su Huaishang was more powerful than Fearless Champion to begin with. Under the barrage of attacks, Brother Fearless' life points were dropping rapidly, and the wounds on his body were increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. This is not good. Fearless Champion grumbled internally. 2 against 1, and we're still being killed. What kind of joke is this? Originally, Brother Fearless wanted to use words to force Su Huaishang to attack first. Then, he and his teammates could use the information they had to wait for the enemy to attack first. But to their surprise, the enemy attacked first, and the 2 of them were unable to withstand it. This won't do. If I die like this, I'll lose my face and I'll lose my bonus. Looks like I have no choice but to fight. Seeing that the situation was about to collapse, Fearless Champion finally made the decision to reveal his trump card. At the very least, he wanted to take the enemy down with him. The next second, Brother Fearless squealed like a pig being butchered. After all, they were teammates. Fearless Champion, who was rushing back to help, heard the squeal and knew there was no need for him to rush forward. As expected, after taking 2 hits, Fearless Champion stood up straight, raised a spear, and activated his title's ability. Name: Cooked Wheaten Chef, Tornado Special Ability Type. Active Consumption. Consumes 1,000 stamina points upon activation and 300 stamina points per second thereafter. Once this skill is activated, it cannot be stopped until the player's stamina points reach 0. Effect: raise the weapon above your head and use the strength of your arms to spin it around, creating an AoE continuous damage like a tornado. Cooldown: 80 minutes. Effect radius depends on the environment. Requires a long weapon to activate. Remark: this skill was created by a cooked wheaten chef known as the strongest man on the continent. Hailing from Shaanxi, he was an expert in using a large steel staff. Not only was he a good cook, he was also highly skilled in martial arts. Other than creating many Chinibya dishes, he also created the famous 49 ways to break the family staff technique. Together with the 7-star knife Ryan, he was known as the master of the knife and staff. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Instantly, the spears started to spin above Fearless Champion's head. The sound of wind being torn apart gradually created an invisible gust of wind. Su Huaishang's attack was forcefully stopped by this gust of wind. What the F***CK? What kind of skill is this? It sure is powerful. Will he just fly into the air and use his mouth to fire cannon? You are all too naive. I've seen him use this skill before. It looks like he is just spinning the spear on the spot, but in reality, it consumes a lot of stamina points. The audience outside the stage was quite excited to see someone use such a powerful skill, but the players inside the stage were not so relaxed. Once this skill was used, Su Huaishang's expression shifted. Even though this title skill was quite annoying, in practice, it was quite powerful. The user did not need to move at all, and they would be able to attack the enemies in the air without any blind spots. Furthermore, this cooked wheaten chef tornado had a very strange attack judgment. Those who were too close to the caster would feel a repulsive force, and those who were too far away would feel a pulling force. In conclusion, no matter if they wanted to escape the skill's range or get close to the caster, they would lose a lot of life points. It was difficult to attack him from a distance, because flying items that were not powerful enough would be blown away by this tornado. Therefore, Su Huaishang could only stand in the wind and wait for her opponent's skill to stop. But at the same time, the threat from Invincible Champion closed in without a doubt. Brother Invincible was also pulled into the tornado's range, but this skill was not an indiscriminate damage skill. Therefore, even though Brother Invincible would be pulled by the wind, he would not lose any life points. Under these circumstances, if Invincible Champion chose to fight Su Huaishang, then the latter would be in a very bad situation. Escape. Fine, everyone was in the eye of the tornado. As long as they kept moving, no one would be able to catch up to the other. But moving meant giving up on defense, and the loss of life points would increase. Defending. Fine, but if she had to defend against Invincible Champion's attack and the tornado at the same time, the loss of life points would not be slow. And the last option, to attack. That did not seem like an option because that would cause her to suffer the combined damage of the previous two options. That would be the fastest way to die. However, when Invincible Champion got close to Su Huaishang, she chose to attack. Perhaps some people would think that this was a moment of recklessness or even a sign of self-abandonment, but that was not the case. Su Huaishang was a player who would not be easily swayed by emotions. The exception was when she was fighting Brother Ju. Most of the time, her judgment was calm and accurate. She would do this because in the most disadvantageous choice, she saw the opportunity to turn the tables. Captain Su, the result has been decided. I'm sorry. When Invincible Champion resisted the wind and moved 2 meters away from Su Huaishang, he confidently declared his victory. Yes, the result has been decided. Su Huaishang turned around, and the murderous intent in her eyes shimmered. But I do not know what you have to apologize for. In that moment, Invincible Champion's terror points shot up. His instinct made him feel a sense of danger that he had never felt before. But at that moment, there was no way for him to take a detour. The only thing he could do was face his opponent head-on. Whether it was to boost his courage or to scare his opponent, in that second, Invincible Champion roared and used the name of his skill. Extreme King's Shocking Sky Punch. Using a punch in this wind is a mistake. At a time like this, Su Huaishang still had the energy to point out her opponent's mistake. The power of the punch and the wind of the punch will be weakened by the wind and will be harder to control. When she said that, she dropped the knife in her left hand and tossed it lightly into the path of her opponent's punch. Bang! Following a strange sound, Invincible Champion's fist came into contact with the surface of the knife. Even though the knife was knocked away, the path of his punch was also slightly off course. Even the slightest bit of interference will result in this, Su Huaishang said as she dashed through the wind. She leaned forward to evade her opponent's attack and used the knife in her right hand to activate skill. In this kind of environment, the best way to attack is to gather all the energy in the weapon and use a physical attack. After that, the knife rose, the shadow flashed, and the body was cut in half. A single cherry blossom, broken moon, gave the audience a textbook example of a slash from the waist. Chapter 1005, November 11th, 2 a.m. The fourth round of Battle of the Four Worlds had ended, and the top 16 of tournament for the best S2 had been announced. After the live stream ended, the videos of the various matches quickly appeared on various platforms that were not connected to the neural connection system. Many viewers who had already watched the live stream exited the neural connection mode and went to watch the other matches that they had missed. Of course, there were also those who, in order to make their presence known, would go and watch the matches they had already watched again and again. Moreover, they would constantly spoil the matches in the bullet screen. On the other hand, the gaming forums were bustling with activity. The players were excitedly discussing the results of the few matches that had just ended. First, Underworld Frontline, who used only 10 minutes to finish the match, once again refreshed their standing in the hearts of the players. During the semifinals, they gave the impression that they had not given their all. Furthermore, until the fourth round, they had not lost a single member. If their opponents were not that good, then things would be different. But looking at the 4 rounds, be it Zombie Blade's first and second teams, Brahman's second team, or the duo led by a professional player, they were all undeniably strong teams. This made Underworld Frontline's record of 0 deaths look incredibly impressive. If we were to follow the rules of the preliminary round, they should be ranked first among the 16 teams. Then, we'll take a look at the match between Hyodii and Regulation. Now, we can refer to Regulation as Regulation because the other teams from their studio have already bid farewell to the competition. Just as everyone expected, Order seemed to have successfully advanced to the next level. But that was only from the result. From the process, it was not easy for them to advance to the next round. In fact, in the middle of the match, there were people who thought Regulation would lose this battle. No one knew how Hyodii managed to find powerful characters like Dienli King and Samon Tyr to help him, and no one expected them to be able to come up with such an ingenious plan to fight Regulation 3 against 1. In the previous matches, Regulation had never been beaten by more than 2 members, and they had never been beaten to the point where they were left with only 1 member. Even when they ran into Zombie Blade, who was at full health with the aid of drugs, in the preliminary round, they only lost 2 members. And that was when Phantom Dawn had gone to solo the boss. When Phantom Dawn returned to the battlefield, Lying Drunk was ambushed by a suicide attack, and Sashimi was killed by a 2-on-1. Zombie Blade had also lost 2 members, one self-destructed, and the other was killed by Brother Zen. Furthermore, that was only the first match of the preliminaries. In other words, the powerful analysis team of Order was unable to provide detailed information. If this match happened after 10 rounds, no, after 5 rounds, then Zombie Blade's first team would have been wiped out as well. However, the Frost Monarch had managed to push Regulation to the brink of defeat. If there was a reason why Regulation was able to win in the end, there was only one explanation: Phantom Dawn. Without the use of summoned creatures, he defeated 2 uniqueness figures that were second only to the 4 Pillar Gods. Not long after that, he killed the Ming Nan trio, who were almost at full health in the encounter. In other words, this match was incredibly meaningful. It allowed people to see the hope of defeating Regulation, and at the same time, it pushed the ID Phantom Dawn back onto the altar. After round S1 ended, there was a moment when many people started to question Phantom Dawn's ability. This was because he had been suppressed by loot throughout the match, and even until the end, he did not show any amazing performance. In fact, one could say that he had been beaten quite badly. But after this battle, Phantom Dawn had once again planted a seed of fear in people's hearts. The shock of personally going into battle and commanding a summoned creature to fight were vastly different from the visual and psychological impact that could be brought about. Currently, other than a certain cunning novelist, no one thought that their team could win against Phantom Dawn, and that included Brahma God's Team 1. Their mentality was similar to what Ruayu had said. Pray that we don't run into him before the finals. Then, the third match, Constellation versus Sengoku. Of the 4 matches, this was the one with the least suspense. Even though most of the players had a certain amount of prejudice and disgust toward a foreign studio, and they did not have much information on Sengoku, the prediction before the match was that Sengoku would win. Although Constellation's strength was not bad, and they had the champion of S1, the other contestants were all new players except for Brony. Obviously, the studio wanted these future stars to show their faces through the competition so that they could be sold for a good price in the future. This kind of team was not bad on the surface, but they had 2 irreparable flaws. 1, they lacked teamwork and cohesion. 2, other than Wild Horse, the rest lacked competition experience. At the end of the day, this was a problem of ideology. No matter what the players and coaches thought, the management of Constellation did not have a strong desire for the championship. They only needed to get a passable ranking. And what kind of ranking would be considered passable? Basically, as long as they fulfilled the two conditions of not missing out on competitions that required a certain ranking and guaranteed exposure, that would be enough. That was why Constellation put a champion of S1 and 3 rookies in Team 1. Team 1's title and the halo of the champion ensured that they would receive a certain degree of attention. The competition itself could allow them to accumulate experience and increase their exposure. It did not matter if they could not win the championship, as long as the value of these players could increase through the competition. On the other hand, Sengoku was obviously ambitious and determined to win. In short, these two teams, whether it was the concept of the studio or the desire to win the championship, they were too different. Under the premise that their strength was similar, Constellation had a higher chance of losing, not to mention Sengoku Team 1, who was stronger than them, and their strength was unfathomable. P.S. Reading up to this point, if you have a vague feeling that I am dissing a certain Premier League team, or if you're a fan of that team, please tell yourself that this is just an illusion, an illusion, an illusion, an illusion. Finally, let's look at the fourth match, Red Cherry Blossom Team 1 vs Order Team 2. If the MVP of Underworld Frontline was Blood Corpse God, then the MVP of Red Cherry Blossom's match had to be Su Huaishang. This match was originally quite suspenseful. Order Team 2's overall skill level was quite good. If there was a gap, it would be their trump card, Barcode, that was slightly weaker than the enemy's trump card, Su Huaishang. As a queen among female professional players, Su Huaishang's ability was at least on the same level as Drunken Dream. Barcode's skill level was obviously half a level lower. Furthermore, Barcode, before the match entered the final stage, he was unfortunately replaced by 2 non-trump card players. In that final battle, Su Huaishang played the role of a trump card when she used Cherry Blossom, Broken Moon, to kill Invincible Brave. Fearless Brave understood that this match was over. Not long after, Brother Fearless, whose stamina points had been drained by his skill, became a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. With his death, only Ji, who specialized in healing, and the Big Snowman, who had an extremely high IQ, were left in the second order team. This combination was not enough to deal with Blood Rose. With the addition of Su Huaishang, the result was self-evident. In conclusion, in the fourth round of the semifinals, some people were eliminated while others became gods overnight. Before the video of the match was finished, many forum gods, keyboard warriors, and professional ghostwriters were already on the move. They could not wait to predict, analyze, and create controversy outside of the internet in real life. There was one person who was already planning something else, 3am, at a crossroad in the suburbs of S-City. This place was secluded. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was in the middle of nowhere. Even though there were few streetlights, there were definitely no cameras. At this time, a thin figure in a black hoodie and sweatpants was standing in the middle of the road. He was mumbling something. On the ground in front of him was a magic circle about 2 meters in diameter drawn with chalk. In the middle of the magic circle was a small metal basin. The basin was filled with a red liquid that looked like blood and many unknown materials. On a few symmetrical points in the magic circle, there were several lit red candles. An underscore name underscore Satan's, dim underscore Herscher underscore dim underscore Koenig underscore Webefeld underscore Crofton underscore der underscore Finsternis. The man mumbled to himself for a while. Then, at a time when the moonlight was covered by dark clouds, suddenly, whoosh, a strange wind blew out the candles. Then, all the street lights around him started to flicker at the same time. It was as if there was a malfunction in the circuit. In a few short moments, the intersection was plunged into complete darkness. A few seconds later, the moon peeked out from behind clouds. The surrounding street lights returned to their stable state, and at the crossroads, there was already another figure. You're always full of surprises, Feng Bujue. Hearing this, he laughed her. I'm sure everyone already knows who was summoned by the array. And from the first line of his appearance, the person in the black hoodie who was summoning demons in the middle of the night was Brother Ju. Being summoned by me? Are you surprised? Feng Bujue asked with a smile. Woody's signature wretched laughter could not be changed. It's not a surprise. It's a pleasant surprise. Okay, whatever. Feng Bujue did not want to play word games with him, so he responded casually. I don't know how long you can stay here. I'll get straight to the point. He paused. Let's make a bet. Woody heard this and was slightly startled. Then, he showed an almost perverted smile. He laughed crazily for a while, then used his middle finger to push the white glasses on the bridge of his nose, and said, Feng Bujue, before I answer bet or no bet, I want to ask. His tone changed slightly. Do you really think that there's a possibility of a fair bet between you and me? It doesn't exist. Feng Bujue's response was straightforward. In terms of the 4 elements of gambling, you have the advantage. Oh? There's a theory of the 4 elements of gambling? Woody replied. Why haven't I heard of it before? Because I came up with it myself. Feng Bujue replied. Is that so? Then I'm very interested to hear it. Woody continued. Feng Bujue shrugged and said directly, First, the technique to complete the cheating and see through the cheating. Second, the psychology of absolute calmness and taking every conceivable possibility into account. Third, the luck summoned by courage and faith. Fourth, the force that is enough to protect oneself or collect the chips after the bet exceeds the limit. That's a pretty good summary. Woody laughed. Most gamblers do rely on cheating. If you don't even know this and don't have the ability to see through it, you won't be pitted even if you lose all your money. In gambling where cheating is impossible, you mainly rely on the battle of wits. Expression, language, movements, performance, and observation skills determine the outcome. Then, for gambling where you can't even rely on the battle of wits, such as slot machines, you have to rely on luck. This is also what gamblers need the most, God's blessing. He paused for half a second. And other than these decisive factors, force is the last insurance. If you can't take away the winnings alive, you can't be called a winner. After that, Woody put his hands in his pockets and laughed a few times. You know all this, but do you still want to bet with me? He seemed to feel that this question was not sharp enough. A second later, he added, I have to emphasize, I'm the devil. I'm not the kind of person who disdains cheating, or I won't go back on my word for the sake of my reputation. Of course I understand. Feng Bujue continued to smile. So what? This sentence made the smile on Woody's face disappear. Oomph. After a few seconds of silence, Woody snorted and said, Feng Bujue, you really make me love and hate you at the same time. There's no need for love. I have a girlfriend. Brother Ju immediately complained. You'd better hate me. Compared to love, hate is an emotion that's easier to bear. As far as I know, there are many people who hate me, but I'm still living well. He tilted his head and smiled jokingly. But if there are too many people who love me, I'll be very tired. I'm just making a metaphor. I don't have any emotions. Woody continued. Anyway, let's bet. He spread out his hands. What do you want to bet on? I'm using the champion of the second stage of the candidate game. When Brother Ju said those words, Woody's expression changed quite obviously. To bet on the love of Ruoyu. Chapter 1006. You're back. At 4:30 in the morning, Feng Bujue heard this as soon as he entered the house. Didn't you go back to your room to sleep after the game? Brother Ju replied as he changed his shoes. Ruoyu was holding a bowl of instant noodles, wrapped in a robe, and sitting on the sofa in the living room, watching a horror movie. You woke me up with a start before you left, Ruoyu said as she took a sip of noodles. Then I couldn't sleep. Feng Bujue changed his shoes and walked into the living room with a smile. Since you were so worried about me, why didn't you follow me out? If you wanted me to follow you, you wouldn't have sneaked out in the middle of the night, Ruoyu replied. Why would I ask for trouble? Her words sounded like she was throwing a tantrum with Brother Jew, and this caused Feng Bujue's despicable power to rise to a height that was unimaginable to human beings. Note, the power of baseness is a unique, invisible value used to measure the baseness of a living being. That's right. I came up with this setting when I was typing this line of text. The next second, Brother Jew used a tone that sounded like he was trying to attract a customer and added, "Who are you mad at?" Ruoyu heard this and narrowed her eyes. She turned around and said, "If you use that tone again," she said seriously, "I'll hit you." Feng Bujue really did shut up when she said this. He wasn't afraid of being hit, but he felt that her response was too cute. Ruoyu's lines seemed to be used by children under the age of 8. Okay, I was wrong. After a few seconds of silence, Feng Bujue, as a man, apologized. "I'll call you next time." "No need," Ruoyu immediately replied. "No need for what?" Brother Jew was puzzled. "You don't have to apologize because you didn't do anything wrong," Ruoyu replied. "If there's a next time, you don't have to call me because I'm too lazy to go." She turned her head and continued eating her instant noodles. "I know you have a reason for everything you do, and you know what you're doing. It's just that I'm a little annoyed that you're hiding things from me." Yeah, Feng Bujue heard this and thought for a moment. "There are a lot of things I'll tell you in the future, but now it's not the right time." "It's fine," Ruoyu replied calmly. "I can wait." Before she finished, Feng Bujue walked around the sofa and sat down beside her. His gaze was firm, but he didn't look directly at her face. "Don't worry, I won't make you wait too long." November 12th, noon, Feng Bujue's office. Brother Jew had been there since 8 in the morning. Based on the time ratio of non-sleeping mode, it had been 8 hours. In those 8 hours, Brother Jew had been using 8x speed to watch the recording of their next opponent. Brother Jew's brain speed in the game was much faster than normal people's. After getting used to it, he had been using 8x speed to watch the recording of their next opponent. Obviously, their opponent this time was not to be underestimated, and the name of this team was Blade. Even though we all know that they are actually an investigation team planned in the game world by Joku, their public image was still that of a gaming studio. Therefore, they had to do whatever the studio wanted to do. Competitions like the tournament for the best. Regardless of whether it was from the perspective of a studio or from their own job, they couldn't miss it. Of course, since doing business was just a cover, there were many aspects of the Blades Club that people didn't understand. First of all, their official website was very simple, to the point of being crude. Many players didn't understand why their official website was worse than those third-rate studios, even though they were a top-tier studio on the strength rankings. Looking at the official website of Blades, there was very little information that could be found. Their office address was listed as one of the floors of an e-commerce center in City S. They only had an email address for contact, not even a phone number. The basic information of the studio's players was only their in-game ID, age, gender, and other information. Even their photos were not of the players themselves, but of their in-game avatars. There weren't many good hyperlinks on the entire official website, and there was only that much information. Rather than saying that it was a company's website, it was more like a beginner's experiment for learning web development. Secondly, the Blade Cutting Edge Workshop did not recruit full-time players. Never. No one knew what the studio's recruitment mechanism was like, but the website always stated that our company's email does not accept any resumes. However, there were quite a number of professional players in Blades. When they were asked how they got into the company by outsiders in the game, all of them said the same thing: "Friend introduced me." When others asked them to help introduce themselves, they would firmly say, "Our company is full of people." However, even though Blades didn't recruit people who worked in the real world, they still welcomed in-game club members. Their attitude towards these outside club members was similar to that of other studios. As for the daily business that other studios did, they also did it. Things like bringing players. Note that it was bringing and not bringing, to practice, selling virtual items, selling peripheral goods, and so on. It was just that when Blades did these business, they always gave people the feeling that they didn't put much effort into it. It wasn't that they didn't do a good job, whether it was selling services or goods. Blade's products could be said to be reasonably priced and worth the money, but when it came to soliciting business, they had a vague attitude of if you want to come or not, I'll be more relaxed if you don't come. Perhaps this was a characteristic of civil servants. In other words, there were many suspicious points about Blade's operation. Thankfully, these suspicious points didn't attract too much attention from other studios. This was because they couldn't see any sense of competition for Blades. A studio that didn't even hire an online ghostwriter would never compete for business with other studios. With such a strange studio, naturally, other people had no reason to provoke them. That was about the operation of this secret agency that used the name of a gaming studio, or in other words, the situation in real life. Now, it was time to talk about the situation in the game. For this tournament for the Best S2, Blades only sent one team to participate. The four main members of this team were Long Almine, 7 Kills, Army Destroyer, and Greedy Wolf. Of the four, other than Army Destroyer, the other three had queued together with the members of Underworld Frontline. Brother Long was the first friend that Brother Ju and Xiao Tan added in Thriller Paradise. If not for his job, he probably would have joined Underworld Frontline. Even though it had been a long time since Brother Long made an appearance in this novel, in some of the scenarios that I didn't write, he would often queue together with the members of Underworld Frontline. Therefore, Feng Bujue was very familiar with Long Almine's ability. If Brother Ju had to give him a title, it would be Thriller Paradise's #1 warrior. Perhaps his strength-based and defense-oriented fighting style was not flashy, and his ranking on the player's power ranking was not that high. But don't forget, Brother Long was the man who defeated Smoke and Perfume in S1. In the whole of Thriller Paradise, there were only a handful of people who could defeat Meng Jingchan in a duel, and Brother Long was one of them. Even though this was partly due to the fact that their fighting styles countered each other, without enough power to back it up, it was just a theory. This went to show that Long Almine's ability was definitely at the level of an ace. The remaining Kill Army Destroyer was even more famous than Long Almine. Other than their eye-catching IDs, the three of them had outstanding abilities as well. 7 Kills, a fighting maniac. He was one of the first few to train his fighting mastery to level A and S in Thriller Paradise. During the battle for the Cape, he almost defeated Feng Bujue, who had the advantage of Soul's Eye. He was an expert in many fighting skills in real life, and he had applied those skills to the game. With the support of his in-game character's powerful physique, he had reached a level that could make one's hair stand on end. Based on Brother Ju's observation, the man was now a god in fighting. He had both active and passive skills, mainly focusing on KOF's moves. During battle, he used all kinds of flashy combo skills to beat his opponent until they were on the verge of death. Army Destroyer, a AAA expert in shooting, fighting, and sorcery. He was the leader of Blade's Edge. There was a rumor that he had encountered and defeated Jianghu's World's Enigma in a killing game matchup, but it was unclear whether that was true or not. Brother Ju's evaluation of him was an extremely tough opponent with no obvious weakness, a strong mentality, and above-average intelligence. No matter what, one would have to pay a certain price to defeat him. Greedy Wolf, a battlefield strategist who focused on medic. He was a political commissar of Blade's Edge. He had a clear view of the big picture, and he was good at using the situation to his advantage. Different from most players who focused on medic, when Greedy Wolf focused on this support mastery, he did not focus on improving his second mastery. Normally, players who focused on medic would focus on shooting, sorcery, or workmanship, and some would focus on fighting. In any case, they had to have a level B secondary mastery, or else their individual combat ability would be greatly limited. Perhaps it was because of that he became the first player to reach level S in medic when he was not even level 40. Feng Bujue was quite cautious of this man. When they met at Ghost Power Company, the two did not have much interaction, but at the time, Brother Ju had observed the man's character through the data perspective, and he was not weak. After seeing his strategy in the competition, Chun Ge felt that the man was quite difficult to deal with. In conclusion, Blade was very strong. They should be the most difficult obstacle for Underworld Frontline since the start of S2. If they could defeat them, they would enter the top 8 and enter the semifinals. But if they could not defeat them, then they would fail. Phew! After watching for so long, I am getting tired. When it was close to 12:30 p.m., Fong Bujua stretched lazily and stood up from the table. I should go destroy some equipment and prepare to go offline for dinner. He mumbled as he walked toward the door of the conference room. Several seconds later, he walked out of the conference room and entered the login lobby's elevator. When the elevator door closed, he pressed the button for the storage room. After 2 seconds, the elevator door reopened, and the storage room appeared before Brother Ju's eyes. After passing through the door, he went straight to the Type 0 magic disintegrator. Halfway there, he reached his hand into his inventory to take something out. The item he was going to destroy was the reward he received from a solo mission on normal difficulty. Even though the main reason he cleared the mission was to contact the Phantom Church to set a trap for regulation, he still managed to clear the mission quickly after that. Unfortunately, the random reward he received after clearing the mission was nothing special. It was just a mediocre piece of excellent equipment. According to the current market, if this equipment was placed in the auction house, it would not be sold if the price was too high. If the price was too low, it would be better to just sell it in the shop. Even if the price was too low, no one would buy it. It would not be worth it, even if the price was too low. For a player like Fong Bujue who could digest the useless equipment on his own, he did not need to worry too much about this kind of problem. Creak, creak, creak. After throwing the item into the disintegrator and pulling the lever, the noisy equipment started to operate. Brother Ju, who was standing at the end of the conveyor belt, could not help but say, "Speaking of which, this magical disintegrator Zero is similar to SCP-914. He rubbed his chin and pursed his lips. But this is something that is randomly generated by accumulating items and luck, while SCP-914 is a more reliable processed item." While he was thinking, the disintegrator's operation was completed. At that moment, even Fong Buju himself could not believe it. The machine actually produced equipment. Whoa, Brother Ju looked at the conveyor belt that was gradually coming to a stop and the equipment that was quietly lying on the conveyor belt. No, it should be the thing, and immediately showed a complicated expression. His current mood, we can use a famous black talk show star's joke to describe it. If you're black, the feeling America gives you is you're a rich uncle. He pays for your college education, but at the same time, he harasses you. Since the last equipment, I didn't put in much stuff. I thought it would take a long time for equipment to come out. Fong Bujua looked at the machine and said to himself, could it be the drop rate of this disintegrator is related to the quality of the item? Because I threw in a powerful equipment like Artemis's Embrace in this cycle, the drop rate increased. As he spoke, he picked up the item and continued, but this thing, what the hell is it? Chapter 1007. This script was adapted from the 1987 film, The Monster Squad, with some settings from the Devil's Castle series added. If there are similarities, it is not a coincidence. At midnight on November 13th, the 5th round of tournament for the Best S2, the third last round of the competition, officially began. Soon, the top 8 would be decided. Fong Bujue, level 50, Wang Tanji, level 50, Rain Like Rain, level 50, Laughing Soul, level 50, Flower on the Rock, level 50, please select the game mode that you wish to join. You have selected tournament for the Best S2, 4 Worlds Battle. Please confirm. Confirmed. Please select the spectator for this match. Confirmed. Your team has entered the queue. We are waiting for your opponent to be ready. Matching complete. Coordinating nerve connection. Generating scenario. Downloading. Please wait a moment. The smoke of war has just been settled, and the blood is still fresh. The battle rises again, and the people do not wait. The stars gather in the 4 worlds, and the battle is over the 9 heavens. Download complete. Welcome to Tournament for the Best S2, 4 Worlds Battle. This mode provides a scenario introduction, and there is a chance of triggering hidden side quests and special world building. Reward for winning the scenario. Advance to the semi-finals. The scenario introduction will be played soon. The match will begin after that. The system announcement when entering the scenario was not that different from the previous rounds. Other than the reward for winning the scenario, it was basically the same. After the announcement, it was time for the introductory cinematic. Hong Long Long. Following a clap of thunder, the first cinematic appeared before the players. In the middle of the screen was a stone tombstone in the shape of a cross. Next to the tombstone was a large, lifelike statue of Reaper. Even though the face of the statue was hidden in the shadows, every player and audience who were watching the cinematic could feel that he was staring at them. After pausing for a few seconds, the camera began to slowly move to the side, and a depressing, eerie background music began to play. In the next 10 seconds, the players followed the camera view as they walked through a graveyard with broken fences and overgrown trees. Then, the focus of the image moved closer and closer to a castle on the cliff in the distance. One night, 100 years ago, the legendary exorcist Van Helsing led a group of warriors into the castle of the demon king Dracula. As the narrator said this, a series of fast and smooth action scenes were played on screen. They saw a handsome middle-aged man with a beard wearing a white shirt and a black vest, as well as 3 to 5 villagers holding torches and hunting guns. Together, they killed their way into the castle. They used explosives to blast open the castle gate and used knives and guns to kill all the monsters that blocked their way. With the aid of the editor, they quickly arrived at an underground hall. At this moment, Dracula has obtained the legendary Holy Amulet and intends to destroy it on the night of resurrection. Once the Holy Amulet is destroyed, the balance between good and evil in the world will be broken. The human world will fall into the hands of the dark forces. At this point, Van Helsing had already arrived in the middle of the auditorium and stood in front of a smooth, bridge-shaped rock. On the cross-section of the rock, there was a palm-sized, crystal-like, circular amulet embedded in it. Van Helsing stared at the amulet for a few seconds before turning back and shouting, "Yes, that's it. Bring the girl here." As soon as he said that, one of his companions brought a girl in from outside the hall. The girl looked to be about 16 or 17 years old. She had blonde hair and blue eyes, and she was dressed very simply. When she walked into the hall, her slightly immature face showed obvious uneasiness and fear, but there was a trace of determination and courage in her eyes. "I hope we can still make it in time." Van Helsing saw the girl's appearance and wiped the blood that had stained his face as he worriedly muttered. In order to stop all this, Van Helsing came to the amulet and initiated a ritual. The narration interjected and the scene changed. At this time, the girl was holding a scroll in her hand. Facing the amulet, she was mumbling an incantation. The amulet also reacted to the incantation, and light constantly burst out from the crystal. Faster, faster. Although this seemed a little harsh, Van Helsing kept urging the trembling girl to speak faster. Bang! At this moment, accompanied by a loud noise, the glass and door of the hall collapsed, and the ground under everyone's feet shook as though it was alive. "Ah, help!" Suddenly, a few villagers standing in the back screamed. When everyone looked back, they found that they had been dragged down alive by the mummies that had emerged from the cracks in the ground. "Read it quickly." Seeing the girl stunned by the scene in front of her, Van Helsing shouted, "Otherwise, we will all die." After being yelled at by him, the young girl came back to her senses and continued to read nervously. On the night of resurrection, a virgin will recite the incantation in front of the amulet, and it will open the door to limbo, which will devour everything around it. With that said, the border prison opened. Before the narration could finish, the light on the amulet suddenly disappeared. Then, a black hole the size of a human eye appeared on the amulet, and in a few seconds, it expanded to more than 5 meters in diameter. "Oh, God! Run!" Van Helsing's teammates panicked and began to run because the sucking force of the black hole sucked the girl reciting the incantation in the first 5 seconds. However, it was obviously in vain. Soon, the limbo door expanded to an unimaginable size, and the entire hall and even the space of the castle was distorted because of it. Nothing could escape from its devouring. Van Helsing, When Van Helsing made his final struggle outside the black hole, a voice came into his ears. Is this your way? In order to stop me, you were willing to fall into limbo? I just did what I had to do. Van Helsing responded to the voice loudly. And what I can do, don't pretend to be a saint. The voice shouted. You can't save everyone. You can't even save the people who came with you. His words were filled with anger. My life is eternal. One day I will return to this world, and you will suffer forever in limbo. Humph. Van Helsing laughed bitterly. I believe when that day comes, there will be people who will stand up to stop you. After saying that, he was swallowed by the black hole and disappeared without a trace. Chi. The next second, the screen went black, and the introductory cinematic stopped abruptly. Today, after 99 years, after the narration said that the scenario officially started. Main quest triggered. Killed 4 members of Blade. Once the players entered the scenario, the quest announcement came. However, their attention was not on that. None of the viewers who were watching the live stream were paying attention to that as well. Hey, what is this? When Feng Bujue regained his mobility, he found himself lying on a small bed. The size of the bed was obviously not meant for an adult, and neither was the bedsheet that was printed with cartoon characters. But at that moment, Feng Bujue did not look out of place lying on the bed because he had turned into a child. In this scenario, your age has been set to 10 years old. Your appearance, physique, skills, items, sorcery weapons, title, and so on will undergo corresponding changes. 5 seconds later, the same notification rang in the ears of every player. This sure knows how to play. Feng Bujue pulled back the covers and stood on the ground. Is it really a good idea to play with settings during a competition? Actually, there was nothing wrong with it. After all, both parties had been turned into children, so theoretically speaking, it was still fair. Phew. In any case, I'll take a look first. After Feng Bujue stood still, he first observed the room that he was in. This was a very typical room for a child from a middle-class American family. However, it was definitely not in the 21st century. This was because there were no smartphones, tablets, desktops, or handhelds in the room. Feng Bujue looked around. Other than the light bulbs, the only electronic devices that could be found in the room were an alarm clock and an old-fashioned radio. With regard to the other items, they were all things that could be found in a boy's room. There were dirty clothes that were littered everywhere, hats that were too ugly to wear, cheap basketballs, sneakers that did not need to be laced up, toys that were popular in the 80s and 90s, a bunch of baseball stars. Brother Ju looked through them and realized that he had not heard of any of the names and appearances of stars. Therefore, he concluded that this was a planet in the main universe that was similar to Earth. Every inch of the carpet was stained with dried sauce and snacks. Just by looking at it, Chun-Gu could tell that there were at least 6 different sources of food residue and embarrassing monster figurines and posters. Feng Bujue believed that if he looked carefully, perhaps he could find some porn that was not that heavy for him under the bed. But he did not do that. After my body shrank, my vision became lower. After Feng Bujue scanned the room, he walked to the wardrobe. I'm still not used to it. As he said that, he opened the wardrobe door. As expected, this floor-length wardrobe had a full-length mirror embedded in the inside of the door. Brother Ju looked at himself in the mirror and thought to himself, as expected of Woody's program, not only did it shrink the character's clothing and hairstyle, it also perfectly restored my appearance, body shape, and height when I was 10 years old. Even though he did not have a strong reaction when he looked at himself in the mirror, at this moment, the audience watching the game was about to go crazy. Haha. This. Some people were incoherent. That dead fish, eyes haven't changed at all. Haha. Some people were complaining. Haha. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to look through the video and use his face as an emoji. Some people were full of malice. I really want to get my son a mini clown costume like this. He's so cute. Some people were focusing on the wrong thing. In any case, compared to Brother Ju's tepid attitude, the audience's reaction was much stronger. Other than that, you should have noticed by now that other than Feng Bujue, the other 7 players in the scenario had been turned into children, And their changes were also very interesting to watch. Therefore, in the next 5 to 30 minutes, the news about this match spread like a virus on the livestream platform, and it attracted a large number of viewers. Once they heard that they could see the children versions of the players, most of the viewers and even some of the intelligence teams from the gaming studios could not help but come over to take a look. Side quest triggered. Just as Fong Bujue finished his room search and prepared to leave, the system announcement came again. He opened the game menu and glanced at the mission tab. It was, try to meet up with your teammates. Oh, that counts as a mission? Fong Bujue mumbled to himself. In this kind of scenario where the teleportation points are separated, meeting up with teammates is the most basic thing to do. With that in mind, he seemed to be reminded of something, and his eyes shifted. Could it be this mission is hinting that meeting up with my teammates will trigger some kind of sequel? With that thought in mind, Fong Bujue walked out of the room. The room was at the end of the second floor. After Brother Ju walked down the corridor that was several meters long, he followed the stairs to the living room on the first floor. Hey, my little pumpkin, look at you. Why did you change your clothes so early in the morning? A young mother in her 30s with wavy blonde hair greeted him with a warm smile. That's because I can't wait any longer. Fong Bujue used a childish voice, coupled with his lethargic tone and an expression that said, "Are you kidding me?" to deliver this line. When he was looking through the room upstairs, Fong Bujue noticed that the calendar on the wall said that it was Halloween. The system had used a very good way to make the fact that he was wearing a strange costume look more logical. My little baby, you are so cute. The mother walked over to pinch Brother Ju's cheeks and planted a kiss on his forehead. All right, Mommy is going to leave now. Breakfast is on the table, so remember to finish it before you leave. Okay, Fong Bujue replied with a face full of annoyance. After the woman went upstairs, he shook his head helplessly and walked to the kitchen. 5 minutes later, Brother Ju was wearing a safety helmet and knee pads. He was riding a small bicycle with an auxiliary wheel and appeared on the side of the road. In his mouth, there was a piece of toast that was slightly burnt. Should I take over the TV station or the radio station? He was thinking about this question as he rode the bicycle. However, a figure suddenly appeared in the middle of the road and interrupted his thoughts. Fong Bujue, a young man who was about 3 meters tall with a large dog, stood in front of Brother Ju and said, "What a coincidence." Chapter 1008. On a sunny morning, the figures of 2 teenagers appeared on the streets of the community. One of them wore a blue short-sleeved t-shirt and had brown hair that was permed into small waves. The other wore black and blue sportswear and had brown hair that was combed into a slanted style. They were E.J. and Derek. Both of them were 12 years old this year and were commonly known as school bullies. The hobby of these 2 youths was to find trouble with other students. Whether you were short, ugly, weird, fat, or simply 1 or 2 years younger than them, they could use this as a reason to bully you. Of course, their behavior wasn't to the point of infuriating both humans and gods. It was nothing more than some mischievous bullying, such as tripping you, throwing your snacks on the ground, talking trash, or taking off your hat, etc. Today, EJ and Derek were wandering around the neighborhood together early in the morning. Like most American children living in the 1980s, in an era where the internet was far from widespread, going out to play with friends was their most common form of entertainment. Hey, look, isn't that Horace coming from across the street? Yeah, that fat guy is eating Snickers again. How about we go up and teach him a lesson? That's exactly what I want. The 2 of them hit it off and immediately stepped forward, blocking in front of Horace. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our show. EJ stood in front of Horace, raised his right hand, and pretended to be holding a microphone. He spoke in the tone of a radio host. Tonight's question is, what made the fat guy so fat? He looked at Horace and asked maliciously, "Fat guy, what do you think?" "Go away, EJ." Horace replied unhappily. Go away, EJ." EJ pretended to be thoughtful and repeated the other person's words. Then he said, "No, this is not a good answer. It doesn't make sense." As he spoke, he passed the imaginary microphone to Derek and said, "Let's give a microphone to the street reporter, Derek, and listen to his thoughts." "Hello, everyone. I'm Derek." Derek took over the microphone and said to Horace sarcastically, "I'm on a street that's blocked because of Fatty's existence." His sarcasm was not brilliant, but it was quite harsh. "Hey, Fatty." He suddenly raised his voice and said to Horace, "Can you stop eating?" As he said this, EJ reached out and knocked the Snickers bar from Horace's hand to the ground and stomped on it a few times with the sole of his shoe. "Listen, I have some problems with my glands, okay?" Although Horace looked honest and timid, he did not give in to the two delinquents. Instead, he retorted, "At least I'm not like some people whose brains don't work well." "What did you say, idiot?" EJ heard this and immediately raised her voice. She pushed Horace and repeated, "Say that again. I'm not an idiot. My name is Horace." Horace replied honestly. F *** K ass. Derek immediately sneered and twisted the other party's name. Here he purposely separated the word Horace and pronounced it whore ass. EJ snatched the comic book in Horace's other hand, tore it in half, and threw it on the ground. "Oh, crap, I accidentally tore it." After doing this, EJ pretended to cover his face with one hand and said, "Maybe it's because my brain doesn't work well." Horace looked down at the Snickers bar and comic book on the ground and muttered something pitifully. Although he said it very softly, the other party still heard it. "What did you say, idiot?" EJ's line was the same as before. Generally speaking, this kind of school bully's brain did not work well, so their vocabulary was limited. "I dare you to say that again." Horace did have some guts. The honest Fatty mustered up his courage and repeated what he muttered in a volume that the other party could hear clearly. "I said, you two are really bastards." Before he could finish his sentence, EJ pushed Horace and pounced on him, pinning him to the ground. Then he rode on Horace's stomach and used his height and size advantage to suppress the Fatty. Then he threw a series of punches at Horace's face. Horace's reaction was the same as any other child who was not good at fighting. After falling into a disadvantageous position, he used his hands to protect the area that was being hit and instinctively closed his eyes. In fact, EJ's fighting style was not very good, and he did not use too much strength when he punched. This kind of punch would not break the skin or leave a bruise, even if it was not blocked. At the end of the day, this was just a fight between children. In their minds, there was no intention to hurt anyone. They just wanted to hit each other a few times to make them beg for mercy. Let go of that child. However, right at that moment, a loud shout interrupted the bullying. The sternness of this sternness was mainly in the tone. However, the speaker's voice didn't sound threatening at all. In fact, it could even be said to be cute. EJ, who was riding on Horace, and Derek, who was cheering at the side, raised their heads at the same time and looked at a young figure 5 or 6 meters away. It was a little boy wearing a mini assassin costume. His attire was very exquisite. The edge of the hood and the details of his clothes were embroidered with gold. There were scabbards on his wrists, leather cases on his torso, and waist used to store various tools, a throwing knife belt, a belt, and so on. Even though these children from the 1980s had never seen or heard of the term Assassin's Creed, the cool attire itself was enough to make people think it was awesome even though they did not understand it. "What? Do you want to be a busybody? Robin Hood?" Derek stared at Wang Tanji for a few seconds and replied in a provocative tone. He also made a dig at Xiao Tan's attire. Since he was 3 years younger than EJ and Derek, there was a clear difference in size between Xiao Tan and Xiao Tan. Therefore, the latter was not intimidated by him at all. "Why don't you find someone who is as big as you or bigger to compete with?" Xiao Tan asked a question that was filled with idiocy. As everyone knew, bullying the weak and fearing the strong was an iron rule in the world of delinquents. Under the premise that they did not have the advantage in numbers or physique, they usually would not take the initiative to attack. "Hey, you want to be a hero, right, kid?" EJ stood up from Horace and approached Xiao Tan with Derek. "I advise you to save it. I don't want to see you go home crying and complaining to your mother later." Same here. Xiaodan did not take a step back. He stood upright, even though he was only 3 meters tall, and showed an attitude that said he was ready to fight at any time. After all, he was an adult. Even if he did not rely on the skills and items in the game, he could still beat the two children with his mentality and experience as an adult. Watch me beat you up. Derek and EJ pounced on him together and used the basic tactic of children fighting. Push him down first, then talk later. This fighting style was also a habit they developed from years of fighting against children who were physically weaker than them. Those children usually could not find a way to escape after being suppressed by their weight, so they would be beaten up one-sidedly. But Shan would not give them this opportunity. Facing the two youths who were nearly a head taller than him and were rushing toward him side by side, he decisively placed one hand on the ground and performed a side kick with his lower body. In the blink of an eye, the soles of his two small feet accurately stepped on the two's knees. The next second, EJ and Derek both cried out in pain and fell to the ground holding their left and right knees respectively. Then, they rolled on the ground with a painful expression. After all, they're all children. That's it. Xiaotan adjusted his posture and thought to himself, but these two are too much. I didn't even use much strength. Just as he was thinking, the two men had already stood up from the ground, but they immediately chose to limp in the opposite direction after they got up. Damn it, you'd better remember this. Wait for me. After the two ran a few dozen meters away, Xiaotan walked to Horace and asked, Are you okay, kidda buddy? He almost blurted out the word kid. I'm fine, thank you. Horace patted the dust off his body and asked excitedly, I say you're really good. You can do that. What is that? Chinese kung fu? I guess so. Xiaotan smiled and replied casually. Unexpectedly, Horace became even more excited. Oh, that's so cool. He paused for half a second and continued, I'm Horace, what's your name? Wang Tanji. Xiaotan said his game nickname directly. Based on his experience, the system would usually deal with cultural differences in terms of address. Oh, Wang, nice to meet you. Sure enough, Horace's reaction did not seem out of place. Me too. Horace, Xiaotan replied. At this point in the conversation, Xiaotan actually wanted to find a chance to leave. Although it was important to be a hero, he still had a mission to complete. Right? Suddenly, Horace seemed to have thought of something. He widened his eyes and asked, Wang, are you interested in joining our club? Club? Xiaotan was confused for half a second and asked, What club? Horace did not immediately answer his question, but asked, Do you have time now? I'll take you to meet a few people. At the same time, in the same neighborhood, on another street. Yo, isn't this brother 7 kills? Feng Bujue, who was riding the bicycle, had one leg on the ground. As he looked at the person who blocked his way, he quickly ate the toast in his mouth. The fact that Brother Ju and 7 kills could recognize each other was definitely not because they knew each other since they were young. The two of them mainly identified each other by their clothes. After the clothes matched, they naturally found some similarities to the adult version when they looked at the face. Yes, it's me, 7 kills replied with a smile. Are you walking your dog? Feng Bujue glanced at the big dog that 7 kills was holding and asked with a smile. Then are you practicing riding? 7 kills also glanced at Brother Ju's mount and replied, Wait here. I'll lock the bike first. Feng Bujue replied with a fake smile. Wait here. I'll lock the dog first. 7 kills also replied with a fake smile. The two of them settled their tasks by a big tree and a fence on the side of the road, then returned to the pedestrian path. I didn't expect to be able to fight you so soon. After they stood still, 7 kills was the first to speak. Yeah, life is full of surprises, Feng Bujue replied. Maybe this duel in front of us will decide the outcome of the entire competition, 7 kills said. That's not necessarily true. Feng Bujue said, Our teammates are not weak, right? That's true. 7 kills smiled and already got into a fighting stance. Feng Bujue also turned sideways to face his enemy and was ready to react. The two of them faced off in silence for almost a minute. During this time, there was a postman, 2 morning joggers, a patrol car, 9 passers-by, and 3 other kids accompanied by their parents who walked past them or across the street. Basically, not a single person's gaze lingered on them for more than 5 seconds. Suddenly, the 2 of them used their childlike voices to let out a long howl. Then, following the howl, they rushed out. Pa 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 pa. Then, using their childlike physique, they used all kinds of flashy fighting moves and engaged in a fierce battle on the street. Even though Brother Bujue and 7 Kills did not intend to go easy on them, their strength and speed had all been reduced to a very, very low level. This made the battle scene incredibly cute. There was no collision of force, no energy that cut through the air, and no blinding speed. There were only 2 agile primary school students exchanging blows on the street. After fighting for only 10 seconds, Fong Bujue realized a problem, and he pointed it out in the middle of the battle. F***ck me. This is not right. After both of our physical fitness has been reduced, people like you who know how to use fighting skills have a huge advantage. You can't blame me for that, 7 Kills replied. Everyone's body has shrunk, that's fair. It's your own problem that you don't know how to use fighting skills. TSK. Fong Bujue scoffed unhappily. Then let's fight it out with skills. Then, he made his move. Chapter 1009. Fong Bujue shouted and jumped back a step. He bent his legs slightly and steadied himself. Then he crossed his hands in front of his chest and said, "Eat my big Spixium light." What? 7 Kills was shocked when he heard that. Blades had naturally investigated Underworld Frontline before the match, but he had never heard of Fong Bujue having Spixium's ray. 2 seconds later, they heard, "I'm sorry, but this voice was not triggered by a skill, but by Fong Bujue himself. His hand didn't emit any light, and it just pretended to tremble." What are you doing? 7 Kills looked at Fong Bujue's actions as the corners of his mouth twitched. Humph. Fong Bujue snorted coldly. It's obvious that I'm bluffing. Is that so? 7 Kills' lips twitched, and his eyelids twitched. I can do that too. As he spoke, he took a step forward and threw out a punch. 100-style wild bite. Fong Bujue knew very well that 7 Kills was not like him. He was just saying it, but 7 Kills really did make a move. As mentioned in the previous chapter, the 100 picking style, Wild Bite was a fighting skill that only consumed 100 stamina. Its damage wasn't considered high, but this move was classified as a B-grade skill. This was because this was a starting move that could be linked to several follow-up skills. Once hit by this move, there was a high possibility of being killed by a series of combo attacks during the duration of the hard hit. Therefore, Brother Ju, who was well aware of this, would definitely not take this attack head-on. Too naive. Do you think I'll let you catch such a flaw? While provoking his opponent, Fong Bujue instantly activated body-building technique of spiritual sense, change, and suddenly moved to the side. But he never expected crackle. In the next second, Brother Ju's body let out a series of cracking sounds, and his body suddenly became sluggish. What? Fong Bujue was shocked. Oh no, this body can't bear the burden of the body enhancement technique. As he thought about this, 7 Kills' fist had already arrived. Humph. Even though I don't know the reason, it looks like you've made a mistake. After that, an old fist. Oh no, a small fist landed on Fong Bujue's stomach. Brother Ju, who was already unsteady on his feet, was thrown into the air by more than 10 centimeters. The double damage from his own skill and the external force caused his body to enter a state of near paralysis for a short period of time. He couldn't move at all. He's the ideal punching bag. 7 Kills murmured as he prepared his next move. Then I won't hold back. Ping. In the blink of an eye, his 7 Kills Do Chi exploded, and he followed up with a spin, shouting, "Shadowless Stormy Heavy Kick." This move was aimed at targets that were in the air. The overall movement was to abruptly turn around and leap up. It started with a triple cross kick that was 720 degrees in the air, followed by a high-speed shotgun-style kick that lasted for a few seconds. If all the kicks landed, the target would be hit by 20 to 30 kicks in 4 seconds. The damage would be shocking. In Feng Bujue, as Seven Kills said, due to an accident caused by the setting of the scenario, he was turned into a punching bag, and there was no way for him to react. This is bad. At that moment, even Feng Bujue could not help but think, perhaps I'll die here because of this mistake. I'm sorry, Brother Feng. When the first 2 kicks landed, Seven Kills declared confidently, looks like I've won. Ah. But he did not finish his sentence, because after the 3rd kick, his whole body flew over Feng Bujue's head, and the 20 or so kicks that followed all missed their target. About 5 seconds later, Seven Kills landed on the ground, and he could not help but grumble loudly, "Are you kidding me?" When he turned back to look, Feng Bujue had already recovered and swallowed a life points recovery potion to recover to full health. Looks like it was my height that saved my life. Feng Bujue smiled as he wiped away the blood on his lips. He turned to face his opponent and adjusted his posture. Damn it, I've turned into a child, and the ratio of my height hasn't changed. Theoretically speaking, this shouldn't have happened. Seven Kills mumbled to himself as he turned around. His words sounded like he was trying to justify himself because the scene in the air just now made him feel a little awkward. It was like throwing a skill at an enemy with low HP and, at the same time, turning around confidently. In the end, the enemy did not die. Of course, the ratio of your height hasn't changed, but your weight has, Feng Bujue said. When you were young, you would jump from a height higher than your ribs, and you wouldn't feel anything. When you were a teenager, you would feel pain in your feet. But when you're an adult, you might be injured. It's the same if you're an adult. Even if the power of the skill and your physical fitness have been weakened proportionally, when you actually use it, there will still be some physical changes that will cause the result to be different. Obviously, what he said was also a kind of explanation. Brother Bujue used the excuse of answering his opponent's question to explain his mistake earlier. I see. Seven Kills nodded. As expected of Brother Feng, your analysis is indeed fast. You're too kind. Feng Bujue also nodded slightly. The two of them looked at each other without batting an eyelid. Taking advantage of this exchange and flattery, they found a way out of this embarrassing situation together. But since the pretense project was done, there was no need for politeness. Seven Kills changed the topic. Is it really okay for you to tell me this information? It's fine. Feng Bujue also changed his expression and tone. He replied arrogantly, "Whether you tell me or not, it won't affect my victory that much." After he said that, the two fell into a silent confrontation again. The second round was about to begin. Right at this moment, another person joined the battle. The two of you are already fighting. At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly came from behind Brother Ju. Along with the voice, there was a shadow. Feng Bujue heard the voice and turned around. He realized that he was already shrouded by the tall figure of the speaker. "It's really you, Brother Feng." Long Aomin looked down at his brother Ju, who was several heads shorter than him, and said with a smile, If I didn't look at your clothes, I wouldn't have recognized you. But I can recognize you even without looking at your clothes." Feng Bujue looked at the child, who was 1.7 meters tall, and had the face of a man in his 30s, and grumbled from the bottom of his heart. I'm just a little bit older." Brother Long replied with a smile. "I went to a sports school when I was young and was trained to be a top athlete. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to become a professional athlete." Feng Bujue was not in the mood to listen to this. Before the man finished, he slipped past Brother Long and started to run. As he ran, he yelled, "Cheating! This is so cruel. The system is so shameless." But seeing this guy running madly like a stray dog, like a thirsty deer, he didn't even want his bicycle anymore. After 2 seconds, Seven Kills and Long Aomin recovered at the same time and yelled in unison, "Hey!" They did not expect Feng Bujue to be so thick-skinned as to run away. When the two recovered, they immediately turned to give chase. As they ran, they shouted a line that would not work in 99% of situations. "Stop right there. Stand your beep." Feng Bujue, who was about 10 meters away, due to his physique, running 2 seconds earlier did not make much difference, turned back to yell, UF asterisk king, tell me this is sure sway. Look at you. You don't even need to show your identification to buy cigarettes, alcohol, or Casanova. It's none of your business that I'm young. Brother Long was familiar with Brother Jew, so he was used to this level of sarcasm. Stop running if you dare. Who cares about you? If you don't run, you'll die. Phone Buju added, I'm warning you. If you keep chasing me, I'll call the police. Humph. Call the police? Before Brother Long could reply, Seven Kills smirked. Is it the police's job to deal with a fight between children? Help me. To everyone's surprise, Phone Bujua started to scream. In broad daylight, in the middle of the night, there's actually a pedophile and his minions who want to capture me back. Beep. Ah. What the F asterisk CK? Brother Long and Seven Kills were shocked. They had not encountered such a shameless person in a battle before. However, Phone Bujua's yell did not attract too much attention from the passers-by. First, there were not that many passers-by to begin with. Second, no matter what, at least from the perspective of the NPCs, Brother Long was still a child, or at most, a teenager. Third, the three of them were wearing Halloween-themed costumes, which made Brother Jew's words unconvincing. Thus, the three of them started to chase each other down the walkway in the community. No one knew when this would end. At the same time, hundreds of miles away from where the players were 10,000 meters above the ground, a commercial cargo plane with the Browning logo was flying steadily. In the cockpit, a pilot in a shirt was complaining to his co-pilot. This is such a depressing job, isn't it? Man, huh? The co-pilot was confused. What's wrong? What's wrong? The pilot replied in a mocking tone. We're using a junk modified from a World War II bomber to carry a bunch of wooden boxes filled with dead people. Should I throw a party to celebrate? Is that so? The co-pilot shrugged. Then why don't you think about it? Did our passengers complain? Did they get airsick? Did they ask you for almonds? The pilot heard this and smiled. You're right. This job is not bad. We should be happy about it. Like most cutscenes in low-budget horror films, these two guys had limited lines and were very uninformative. It made people wonder if the screenwriter spilled coffee on his pants when writing these dialogues. However, the main purpose of this cutscene was still achieved, which was to convey some information to the audience. Rumble. While the two pilots were talking, suddenly, a strange sound came from the cabin behind them. After hearing the sound, the two turned their heads at the same time, looked at each other, and then looked at the cabin door behind them. I thought they were dead, the pilot said half-jokingly. Yes, they are dead, the co-pilot responded. After a short silence, the pilot took off his headphones and stood up. I have to check in the back. The passenger in the passenger seat made a non-committal look and replied while chewing gum. Okay, then I'll continue to stay here and make some strange sounds. So far, the two of them were still in a relatively relaxed state and didn't take the sound seriously. Of course, this was the usual style of horror film characters. They often showed a disdainful attitude towards small and strange phenomena, but at the same time, they wouldn't leave it alone and had to investigate it. And this kind of contradictory behavior was the main reason why they took a luncheon. Click! As the cabin door was opened, the pilot quickly stepped inside. The two sides of the cabin were filled with large boxes covered by nets, and in the middle was an unsecured rectangular box. For some reason, the lights in the cabin were red, which made the pilot have to hold a flashlight to check. In short, he used the flashlight to simply sweep around and didn't find anything unusual. But just as he was about to go back, suddenly, squeak, squeak, a bat appeared with a shrill cry and flew towards him. The pilot saw this and instinctively screamed and squatted to the side to avoid it. After dodging the attack, he cursed, "Come on, come out, you bastard, where are you?" He cursed and turned around, trying to find the trace of the bat. Unexpectedly, when he turned around, what he saw was a man wearing a black tuxedo and a black cloak. This person was shockingly pale, his facial features were distinct, his fangs were exposed, and his hair was combed back. This classic look of Dracula appeared in many literary and film works, and it was basically ingrained in people's hearts. Generally speaking, we would think that the Count would pounce on the pilot in an instant and bite his neck, sucking his blood dry. But this Dracula in the world of Monster Subduing Squad was a very non-mainstream existence. Bang! Even the pilot himself didn't expect that in the next second he would be punched. Yes, this Dracula didn't pounce on people to suck their blood, nor did he use some kind of cool ability, such as psychokinesis or hypnosis, to deal with the other party. What he did was just raise his hand and cleanly punch the other party. Chapter 10:10. The pilot was punched in the nose by Dracula. With a grunt, he fell to the ground. Dracula still had no intention of sucking the man's blood. Instead, he stared at the rectangular box in the middle of the cabin and slowly squatted down beside it. It did not take long for the pilot, who was punched, to catch his breath. He raised his head and saw Dracula squatting on the ground, staring at the large wooden box in a daze. Coincidentally, there was a joystick near where the pilot fell, and this joystick could be used to open up the floor in the middle of the cabin. As mentioned earlier, this plane was modified from a bomber from World War II. That was why it had such a setup. At that moment, the clever pilot reached out his hand and pulled on the joystick. In the next second, there was only a "Kacha" sound. The floor of the cabin opened up, and the rectangular wooden box fell with a whoosh. However, Dracula did not fall with the box. The moment the floor opened up, he levitated in the air and looked at the pilot. This scene is a reenactment of the original movie, but I personally think there's something that doesn't make sense here. The plane is a moving object, and when Dracula hovers in the air, his body doesn't have any contact with the plane. Therefore, in theory, he should be hit by the wall at the end of the cabin very quickly, but that did not happen. Even though he could forcefully explain that, Dracula used some kind of electrostatic force field to create a repulsion or friction force with the surrounding environment, so he was able to fly in the same direction as the plane without any physical contact. But I think it is better to say, don't take a movie from the 80s so seriously. Anyway, this bug-like scene did not last for too long. Dracula levitated in the air and glared at the pilot. Then, he morphed into a bat and flew out from the hole in the floor to chase after the falling wooden box. At the same time, at another part of the scenario. This kid runs faster than a dog. If I'm not paying attention, he will disappear. Phew, forget it. Let's not chase after him for now. In this condition, my stamina points are depleting fast. After following Fong Bujue for many blocks, 7 kills, and Brother Long, lost him. The two of them were panting heavily. Their expressions were that of a cooked duck has flown away. They were quite depressed. By the way, aren't you from a sports school? After catching his breath, 7 kills turned to ask Long Aomin. Furthermore, he is so much taller than us. With his long legs, shouldn't he be able to run faster? TSK. I mainly practice badminton at the sports school, not track and field, Brother Long replied. Furthermore, who told you that you can run faster because you are taller? Based on your words, those who play basketball should change. That's true. 7 kills could not help but laugh. Brother Long, I mean. And Anson. Now that he thought about it, the situation was quite funny. After all, it was not every day that he got to see the kid version of Fong Bujue running away. After resting for about a minute, Brother Long's breathing had returned to normal, so he asked, by the way, have you received a side quest? I have. You want to meet up with your teammates, right? 7 kills answered. Yes, Brother Long said. Brother Long continued. The mission panel says teammates. From the looks of it, we have to gather all of our team members. Then how about we split up? 7 kills suggested. Then we can meet up somewhere. Sure. Brother Long thought about it and agreed. Currently, there is no way to locate the others, so if we split up, we can expand the search area. Therefore, the two quickly agreed on a time and place to meet up, and then they went their separate ways. After the two of them had walked far away, the lid of a trash can that was only 5 meters away from where they had been standing was lifted from the inside. Then, a child with a banana peel on his head and a pair of dead fish eyes slowly stood up from inside. At that moment, A homeless man with a trolley was passing by. He wanted to dig through the trash, but he did not expect to see a little boy. "Hey, what are you doing in my fridge, kid?" The homeless man was obviously a drunkard. His cheeks were red, and he reeked of alcohol. "Don't worry, I didn't touch your food," as Feng Bujue replied. He stepped out from the trash can and used his hands to brush away the dirt on his clothes. "Do you have change, kid?" As the homeless man spoke, he took out a small bottle from his pocket and took a sip. At the same time, he used his body to block Brother Ju's way. "Change." Feng Bujue looked up at the man and then pretended to touch his pocket. "Oh, I do." After he replied, he asked, "What's the matter?" "Sir, give me the money." As the tramp spoke, he looked around with a guilty conscience. Seeing that there were not many passers-by nearby and that no one was paying attention to the situation here, he revealed a terrifying expression and repeated, "Give it to me quickly." "Okay, sir, there's no need to rush," Feng Bujue replied lazily, and his hands reached into his backpack. "Hurry up. Don't dilly-dally." The homeless man kept urging Brother Ju. He did not pay much attention to the actions of the kid in front of him. His attention was mainly focused on the passers-by nearby. Several seconds later, Feng Bujue pulled out the WJQ-308 military shovel from his inventory. When he said that, he swung the shovel at the man. Fine, I'll give it to you now." Several seconds later, Feng Bujue pulled out the WJQ-308 military shovel from his inventory. The reaction speed of an alcoholic was not as fast as the average person. Feng Bujue easily knocked the homeless man out. Then he calmly threw the homeless man onto his trolley and silently pushed him into the alley. On the other hand, in the backyard of a house in the community, "I can't believe I'm doing something like this in the script of a competition." At this time, Defeating Armies was holding a large rake and scraping the fallen leaves on the ground. "You just accepted the setting of becoming a kid, didn't you?" Tan Lang was doing the same thing as him, sweeping the fallen leaves. The two captains of Blade had met at the beginning of the scenario, because in the setting of the scenario, they were playing the roles of two brothers in the same family. However, the parents in their family were very strict. On a day like Halloween, they actually made the children do housework, and it was to do something like sweeping the fallen leaves. Even though the two were not very willing, they still had to verbally agree to it. Unexpectedly, after they agreed, sweep the fallen leaves in the backyard until the area covered by the fallen leaves is less than 5%, was recorded in the mission tab as a side mission. For the sake of the reward, these two really did endure it. "I'm looking forward to the reward after this mission is completed," Defeating Armies said. "I don't think the chance of giving us equipment or skills is high," Tan Lang analyzed. "The reward will most likely be something unexpected, but it will be helpful in borrowing power in the scenario." Defeating Armies nodded and then said, "I wonder, how are Brother Long and 7 Kills doing now? Did they receive a similar mission?" "Ha!" Tan Lang joked. "Perhaps they're doing something similar. Perhaps they're doing worse than us, like picking up dog poop or something." Achoo! At the same time, 7 Kills had returned to the place where he met Feng Bujue and sneezed for no reason. "All right, dog, let's keep running." He found the dog that he had tied to the fence. As he untied the rope, he said, "Well, it's my fault for accepting the mission. I'm sure you understand now." The reason 7 Kills showed up with the dog was because he had received a side mission from his parents, and the content of the mission was complete a dog walk of at least 2 kilometers and bring the dog home. What's that smell? When 7 Kills untied the rope, he smelled something. He lowered his head to take a look. What the? Such a big lump. At that second, 7 Kills' heart was locked in a fierce struggle. Even though the mission did not explicitly state that dealing with dog poop was part of the dog walk, when 7 Kills led the dog out, he did receive a small shovel, a pack of tissue, and a paper bag from his father. These 3 things were currently inside his inventory. If I don't clean this up, not only is it morally wrong, it might cause the mission to fail. 7 Kills looked at the pile of poop. But this is too much. What does this dog normally eat? A baby? That being said, he still had to do what he was supposed to do, The audience that watched this match was really worth it. Not only did they get to see the children's version of the professional players, they also got to see these kids sweeping the leaves, picking up dog poop, and riding small cars. These were all unimaginable scenes. Looking at the other end of the residential area, this piece of land could be considered a rich residential area. The houses in this area were obviously more high-end than the houses in other parts of the residential area. From the size of the land, the style of the houses, and the decoration, they were all beyond the scope of the middle class. The whole place gave off a thick capitalistic air. And inside one of the houses, there were two players who had yet to enter the arena, being tortured. "This is hell," Ruayu said from the bottom of her heart as she looked at the short table before her expressionlessly. At this moment, the short table in front of her was filled with exquisite and expensive tea sets and tableware. There was also a circle of people sitting around the table. Other than Li Ryu, there were 5 little girls around 10 years old and 6 well-made Barbie dolls of different shapes sitting around the table. We should be thankful. This mission did not require us to change into a cute pink princess dress or something. Xiao Ling, who was sitting next to her cousin, said with a hand on her forehead. Obviously, they had also received a side mission that made them not know whether to laugh or cry. Have a 40-minute Barbie tea party with the neighborhood girls. Unlike the 2 players, the other girls at the table were all having fun. They were happily drinking tea and chatting with their Barbie dolls, discussing various life events. "I think it's over between me and John. He actually held that bitch barber's hand last month. I want to marry Tony in the future. He is so handsome. We're going to have 4 children, 1 boy, 1 girl, and a pair of twins. Ah, I know Derek is good looking, but his family is not rich. I don't want to earn more than him in the future. You know what I mean?" For quite a long time, actually, it was less than half an hour, but the 2 players felt that every second was like a year. Ruayu and Xiao Ling's ears were filled with similar conversations. It was undoubtedly a kind of torture for them. I've heard this saying before. Ruayu pinched the bridge of her nose, closed her eyes, and said, "When I was a teenager, I hated teenagers." She paused. Now I suddenly understand the feeling of the person who said this. I have to say, when I was a little girl, I hated little girls. Sigh. Xiao Ling sighed and said, "There is no hurdle in life that cannot be overcome. We have to be strong." Just as they were lamenting, another girl sitting on Ruayu's right suddenly spoke to her. "Haley, how are things on your side?" "What do you mean, how are things? Do you have a boyfriend?" Yes." "Oh, is he handsome? Is his family rich? Have you guys kissed before?" Ruayu heard this and was silent for a few seconds. Then, bang, her forehead slammed heavily on the table. "I suddenly feel so tired." Back to Xiao Tan's side. After accepting Horace's invitation, Xiao Tan followed the chubby boy all the way to a forest on the edge of the community. This place was not very desolate. The nearest residential house was less than 100 meters away. However, there were many trees and weeds nearby. Not far away, there was a small river connected to the sewer. It felt quite wild. "Look, this is the place." Horace led Xiao Tan through the weeds and trees for a distance, then pointed to a big tree. Xiao Tan lifted his head to look in the direction that the man was pointing at. Soon, he saw a tree house that was made from wooden planks and iron plates. "Where is this?" Xiao Tan asked tentatively. "This is our club. My friend and I are experts in studying demons and monsters." "Isn't that cool?" Horace replied and immediately continued. "My friend and I are experts in studying demons and monsters." Chapter 10:11. Oh, it looks like no one is here. Horace poked his head into the treehouse and realized that there was no one there. However, he still led Xiao Tan in through the entrance and asked him to find a place to sit. "It's still early. I think everyone will be here in the afternoon," Horace said as he walked to the table at the end of the treehouse and picked up a monster magazine. He showed the cover to Xiao Tan and said, "As long as you pass our monster test, you can join the club." "Monster test?" Xiao Tan looked around as he responded to Horace. "You know," Horace shrugged and continued, "it's to test your knowledge about monsters to see if you're qualified to join our club. For example? Xiao Tan asked again. For example. Horace thought about it. The way to kill a vampire. Oh, Xiao Tan answered and then almost blurted out. The most thorough way is to be exposed to the sun. Yes, yes. Horace nodded. What else? The wooden stake through the heart is a classic method. Xiao Tan thought about it and said, in some worldviews, their heads have to be chopped off. He paused. Of course, I have a friend who thinks it's not a bad idea to throw them into a hay cutter. Wow, you know so much. Horace exclaimed. Haha, it's nothing. Xiao Tan laughed drily. Actually, his knowledge was limited before this, but after playing Thriller Paradise for half a year, he knew all kinds of classic monsters like the back of his hand. Creak. While they were talking, the entrance to the treehouse was opened again, and a small head popped out from the floor. The entrance to the treehouse was usually on the floor. Hey, Horace, you're here. The chestnut-haired boy in a red t-shirt greeted Horace, and then turned to Xiao Tan. Who is this child? He's Wong, the new kid who moved here. He then turned to Xiao Tan and said, Wong, this is Xiao En. He's the founder of the club. His father helped us build the treehouse. As he said this, Sean also climbed into the treehouse and closed the entrance. Nice to meet you. Xiao Tan greeted the person. Hey, hello, Sean replied politely. Xiao En, I want Wong to join our club. Horace put on a weird martial arts pose and said excitedly, he's super good. Today he used Chinese Kung Fu to help me beat EJ and Derek. But this is a monster club, not a Kung Fu seminar, Sean teased. Wong knows a lot about demons too. You can test him if you don't believe me, Horace immediately replied. It's okay, Xiao Tan said, but I do know some things. Oh, Sean was suddenly energized. Then, try our monster test. If you can answer more than half of the questions correctly, we'll let you in. On the other hand, in the city, in the reception hall of the police station. As usual, this place was busy almost every day, every hour, and every moment. Today, a strange man had come here. Officer, please lock me up. He was wearing a green hooded jacket and jeans and looked to be in his 30s. He kept yelling at the police officers, I'm a werewolf. A werewolf. The police officers who were being pestered by him were also very distressed. To be honest, they rarely heard of a request to go to jail, and they had never heard of a reason like, I'm a werewolf. Just one night, please. It's the full moon tonight. Don't get excited, sir. Please calm down. You don't understand. You have to handcuff me. Put me in a cage. At this point in the conversation, the man who claimed to be a werewolf had already grabbed the shoulders of one of the police officers with both hands. No matter how the other party struggled, he would not let go. Oh, really, buddy? Since you want to be arrested so much, that's great. The police officers were finally annoyed by him. 2 seconds later, 2 patrol officers and a detective came forward together. The 3 of them worked together to twist the man's hands and were ready to handcuff him. What's wrong with this guy? Who knows? Let's contact the mental hospital. After hearing the conversation between the police officers, the man became even more agitated. Oh my God, you still don't understand. You have to. His words came to an abrupt end because he suddenly had an idea. The next second, the man took the opportunity and pulled out the gun on the waist of the nearest police officer. He then used a brute force that came from nowhere to push the 3 people around him away. Bang, bang. He raised his pistol and fired 2 shots at the ceiling without saying a word. Then he shouted, "Lock me up." Bang, bang, bang. Before he finished speaking, 3 more gunshots were heard. But this time, it was not him who fired the gun. It was a patrol officer who came from next door after hearing the gunshots. After the gunshots, the man who claimed to be a werewolf fell down in front of everyone's eyes. In the eyes of the bystanders, this mental patient who attacked a police officer and stole a gun seemed to have been killed, just like that, at the same time, in a museum in the city center. Okay, I'll confirm it with you again. A black police detective in a trench coat said in a helpless tone to a museum security guard who looked like he was nearing retirement age. There was a mummy here from the year 2000, right? Yes, officer, the security guard replied. But he's gone now. He's gone. He's gone. He's history now, the police detective said in his own rap style. Yes, Officer, the security guard confirmed with the same answer. And you? The police detective said as he walked around the security guard. You said you didn't hear anyone come in or leave here, right? Uh-huh. The security guard nodded. Can you hear me now? Hello? The police detective raised his voice in annoyance. Of course, I can hear you clearly, officer, the security guard responded calmly. So, you mean no one went in to steal the mummy? The police detective asked. If there was, I definitely would have heard it, officer, the security guard replied. Yes, of course you would have heard it. I really asked a stupid question. The detective shook his head and said. The detective shook his head and muttered. Then, he suddenly turned around and looked at the security guard. Did you take it? No, officer. The security guard's answer was calm and clear from beginning to end, but it didn't help the case at all. This made the detective very angry. Okay, I was just asking. The black detective raised his hands and turned to look at his white partner. Okay, I tried my best. This case is too difficult, buddy. I think we should change careers and become firefighters. I'm glad you're still in the mood to joke around, Richie, the white detective said with a sullen face. Then he took 2 steps toward the exhibition hall where the stolen mummy was and said, The problem is a mummy that's been here for 2,000 years won't stand up and walk away on its own. Ah? After a groan, the homeless man who was knocked out by Fong Bujua woke up from his coma. When he opened his eyes, he found himself in a dilapidated room with a dirty mattress under him. You woke up pretty quickly. The child version of Fong Bujua's voice quickly reached the homeless man's ears. The homeless man suddenly turned his head and saw Brother Ju sitting on a small stool at the other end of the room, looking at him leisurely. You little bastard. He cursed as he got up and tried to grab him. Fong Bujua, on the other hand, merely sat where he was and uttered a strange word. Taro. Unexpectedly, as soon as the word left his mouth, the homeless man screamed and fell to the ground, his body convulsing for a few seconds. Oh, my back. After the homeless man fell to the ground, he rolled and tried to reach for his back, but it seemed this action was very difficult for him. Don't try. You can't take the chip out by yourself, Fong Bujua said. What chip? The homeless man replied. What are you talking about, you little... Taro. Fong Bujua interrupted the homeless man before he could curse again. Ah! The tramp screamed again, but the pain came and went quickly. Soon, he gasped for breath and asked, What did you do to me? It's nothing. I just inserted a chip into your back with the help of a friend. Fong Bujua said, The technology contained in this chip is far beyond your understanding and imagination. I won't introduce it in detail. What you need to know is that from now on, as long as I say... He paused. You know that word. He was undoubtedly referring to the word Taro. You will become like that just now. Nonsense. How is that possible? Of course, the homeless man did not believe this easily. You still don't believe me? Fong Bujua said. Then I'll say it again to no. Don't. This time, the homeless man was terrified. Don't say it again. Fong Bujua laughed. You should be glad, Mr. Hill. Long-term alcoholism and all kinds of unhealthy living habits have dulled and numbed your nerves. Otherwise, you would feel more vivid pain. Who are you? At this time, the homeless man, Hill, obviously no longer regarded Fong Bujua as an ordinary child. How do you know my name? In the pocket of your jacket. The only thing of value is your driver's license, Mr. Hill, Fong Bujua replied. As for my identity, you don't have to know. You can call me Mr. F, okay. Mr. F, Hill asked, why did you insert that chip into my body? Isn't it obvious? Of course, it's to let you do something for me. Fong Bujua replied in a matter-of-fact tone. After all, I'm still a child. Many things are easier for adults to handle. At the very least, you could be my driver. But why did you choose me? Hill asked. You came to me yourself. Mr. Hill, Fong Bujua replied. You tried to rob me, remember? He spread out his hands and said, Your behavior eliminated all the guilt I felt toward you. With your character, I could talk to you all day. Ah, Hill was inexplicably implicated again. Secondly, given your living condition, I think, even if you suddenly disappear permanently, it won't have much impact on society. Feng Buju's disappear in this sentence was obviously implying that Hill was dead. Anyway, no one will find out in a short period of time. This is also a very suitable condition. Thirdly, Brother Jew paused for 2 seconds and added, similar to the second point, because you are a drunkard and homeless, your integrity will inevitably be questioned by the secular world. For example, no matter what illegal act I coerce you to do, or even if I get arrested with you in the process, I will still be safe. At that time, I just have to pretend to cry, and everything will be fine. And you could try to tell the police that you were controlled by a child with a super advanced chip and forced to commit a crime. See what the result will be. At this point, Hill was already sitting on the ground, stunned. Now, Mr. Hill, if you don't want to hear that word again, get up quickly and change your clothes. Feng Bujua said and pointed to a set of clean clothes on the edge of the mattress. I still have a lot of things to do before sunset. At the same time, on the edge of the city, on a mountain road that was not too rugged, a very simple family 2-box car slowly drove to the side of the road and stopped next to the fence. Then, a pale face appeared in the side window of the driver's seat. Through the window glass and the light barrier, it looked at the city in the distance. No one knew where Dracula got this car, and no one knew why he didn't die in the sun after he turned into a bat and left the plane. No one knew. As a vampire who had left the human world for 100 years, where did he learn to drive? In short, in the world of Demon Subduing Squad, Dracula was a man full of mysteries. Let all begin. After staring at the city outside the car window for a moment, Dracula muttered to himself in a very Chinibi tone. Then he showed an expression of relief after being constipated for a long time, mixed with a little bit of excitement. After he was done, he restarted the car and drove down the mountain. Chapter 10-12. It was almost noon inside the treehouse. Oh, you are much better than I thought. Sean scratched his head and looked at Xiao Tan. You were too humble before. From how I see it, you are an expert on monsters. It's okay. Xiao Tan answered absent-mindedly. At that moment, he had been chatting with the 2 kids, Sean and Horace, for a long time. The so-called monster test was actually some questions and answers about monsters. For a player like Xiao Tan who had been in thriller paradise for a long time, these questions were naturally not difficult at all. Speaking of which, I'm chatting with these 2 kids here. Will it really help the game? Since he had not received any actual benefits so far and did not receive any system notification, Xiao Tan started to wonder if what he was doing was useless. I was right, wasn't I? Sean, Horace said from the side. So one can join our club, right? Of course, Sean said. He can even be our consultant. Ha, that's great. Xiao Tan did not want to dampen the children's enthusiasm, so he forced a smile and then said, Then, I see that it's almost noon. Just as Xiao Tan was about to run away with the excuse that his mother was calling him home for lunch, Sean suddenly thought of something and interrupted him. All right, I have something to show you. As he said that, he had already climbed to the corner of the treehouse and rummaged through the pile of junk. Seeing this, Xiao Tan swallowed the words that he wanted to say and waited to see what would happen. Oh, it's here. Not long after, Sean crawled back with a book in his hand. It was a rather thick book, and the outer layer was wrapped in leather. The whole thing was yellowish-brown, and it looked quite old. 2 days ago, my mother went to the garage auction at Jane Boggs' house and bought me this book. Sean showed the cover of the book to his 2 friends with a mysterious expression. Look at who the author is. This is... Xiao Tan had just seen the handwriting on the cover. Horace, who was beside him, had already shouted, Oh my God, it's Van Helsing. Where did Boggs and the others get it? According to my mother, they seem to have found it in the old house on Dark Creek Road, Sean replied. Xiao Tan thought about it and suggested, can I take a look? Of course. When Sean said the first half of the sentence, he handed the book directly into Xiao Tan's hands, and then he said the second half of the sentence. Provided you can understand it. Sean looked at Sean's looks. Sean's looked at Sean looked at the book. Yes. Sean shrugged. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left the book here and not read it. Xiao Tan said in his heart, I don't understand German. and the system's translation function didn't translate the text in this book, so it could be seen. Sean, Horace, Schouten thought again and asked, "Do you know anyone around here who understands German?" Schouten and Horace looked at each other. A few seconds later, Horace swallowed his saliva and replied, "There is. But that person, what's wrong?" Schouten wondered. "That person is not very friendly. We call him the weird German man," Sean said. "He looks about 60 years old and lives alone in the unit in the northwest corner of the community. No one has ever seen him out of the house, and no one has seen what the house looks like." Sean's tone sounded like he was describing a monster, not a person. "It is said that he's a German spy, or maybe a vampire. Why do I feel like he is just a foreign, empty nest old man?" Schouten couldn't help but complain. "What did you say?" Sean and Horace didn't seem to understand the meaning of this sentence. "Haha, nothing." Schouten quickly brought the topic back to business and said, "If you don't mind, how about coming with me to visit the weird German man?" It was almost noon. On a small road in the city, an ambulance was driving steadily on the road. The driver was a blond man in his 20s. He was wearing a blue uniform and had a pair of headphones on as he drove, listening to slightly noisy music. Perhaps it was because he was only here to transport the body, so he was the only one in the ambulance. At this time, lying in the back of the ambulance was the man who was shot dead at the police station, the man who called himself the werewolf. What the hell? The blond man drove the car to the middle of the road and found that the road ahead was blocked by a brown Ford that looked very shabby. Because the road was relatively narrow, if the car was placed in the middle of the road like this, it could basically block the vehicles in both directions. Unless the driver was willing to risk the chassis of the car to drive to the shoulder of the road, otherwise, it would be impossible to pass. "Hey, what are you doing, buddy?" The blond man helplessly stopped the ambulance, stuck his head out of the window, and shouted at the car. The next second, a pale face appeared in the window next to the driver's seat of the blocking car. On the other hand, on a boulevard in the community. There are also two people on the other side. We can't be careless, Tan Lang said as he crouched behind the green belt on the side of the road. "I'm not careless." Defeating armies hid behind a big tree 1 meter away from his teammates and responded, "In an encounter like this, isn't it the safest way to test the waters with shooting skills?" At the same time, behind a low wall on the opposite side of the boulevard. Thankfully, the power of the players in this scenario is limited, Xiao Ling said as she treated the wound on her arm. "Or else that shot would have killed me, but," Roy Yu, who stood beside her, added, "We've been taken advantage of by the enemy, so we have to be careful not to let them expand their advantage. It's fine." "Huh? Did you think I would only set one keyword?" Feng Bujua said. "Let me tell you, this chip has a wide vocabulary. There are more than 40 words that can make you feel like dying." "You are a demon." Hill roared at his brother, Ju angrily and unwillingly. "You can say whatever you want." Feng Bujue responded noncommittally. He then snapped his fingers and pointed to the door in front of him. "Now, if you don't want to know more about the words that will make you feel uncomfortable, please come and open the door." In the face of such a blatant threat, Hill could only quickly get up from the ground, patted the dust off his body, and then walked to the door of the old house. "I hope after this is over, you will keep your promise. Take out this damn chip," Hill said as he walked to Feng Bujue. "Don't worry. That thing is much more valuable than your life." When Brother Ju said this kind of harsh truth, there was a sense of mockery in his tone. Gulilu, Hill, who had reached the door, held the door handle and turned it a few times. Then he turned to Brother Ju and said, "It's locked." "So what?" Feng Bujue said, "Do you want me to teach you how to break through the door?" The reason he asked that was because when they stole the car earlier, and obviously the vehicle that Feng Bujue and Hill were on was stolen as well, Hill had shown the qualities of an amateur, and in the end, it was with Feng Bujue's careful guidance that he managed to complete the job. "I don't know how to pick locks." After hearing Brother Ju's question, Hill shouted back, "What do you want me to do? Break the door panel?" "You can try." Feng Bujue immediately replied. "Hill wanted to talk back, But he quickly noticed that Brother Jew's dead fish eyes flashed with an impatient expression. Okay. I'll try, don't do anything stupid. The pain caused by the chip was undoubtedly more unbearable than a shoulder dislocation or fracture, so Hill could only do as he was told. Bang! The door panel made a muffled sound with the first hit. Bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. Then there was a series of consecutive hits, which recorded the frequency of Hill's attacks on the door panel. Just like this, after about a dozen hits, finally, Katja, the position where Hill's shoulder was aimed at, had a small hole. See, this kind of thing, how do you know you'll fail if you don't try? Fong Bujue said in a tone like a life teacher instructing a student. Hill snorted coldly and did not reply. He just silently reached his hand into the hole that he had made and then bent his arm to open the door from the inside. A few seconds later, the door of the old house opened just like that. The moment the door opened, a gloomy, indescribable, invisible pressure flowed out from the door. Hill was so scared that he instinctively took a few steps back. Are you sure you want to go in? It was the first time Hill experienced the fear of being surrounded by darkness in broad daylight. He desperately wanted to retreat. Of course. Why else would I come here? Fong Bujue was unusually calm. As he spoke, he took out the compound anti-gravity catapult from his backpack and turned on the searchlight. Considering that the lighting in this house is not good, I'll help you with the lighting when you scout ahead. Don't worry. When he heard the word scout, Hill felt a chill run down his spine. He gulped and turned to look at his brother Jew. He asked in a trembling voice, "Are you sure you want me to scout ahead?" He looked at his brother Jew with a pleading look. "I think you can do this by yourself." "Yes, I can," Fong Bujue replied coldly. "But if there's a cannon fodder here, why shouldn't I use him?" Chapter 10:13. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Xiao Tan and the two NPCs came to a large house in the northwest corner of the community. The three children walked side by side to the fence of the house and stopped. "Okay, I don't think we can find anyone else to translate this book," Sean said to Xiao Tan. "But someone has to knock on the door, right?" Horace said as he glanced at Xiao Tan. "Don't worry, I'll go." Xiao Tan agreed generously. As an adult, he would not be afraid of an unfamiliar neighbor because of some stereotypical prejudice like these children. "You have to think carefully. Wong, he's scary." Horace put on a serious look and reminded him. "He's German. Maybe he doesn't even speak English." Sean thought for a while and said, "Should we first look up the German words for please don't kill us? Bit _ Toten _ Sai _ Michigan _ Nicked." The next second, a voice came from their side, speaking in fluent German. When the three of them heard this, they were stunned and looked in the direction of the voice. What entered their line of sight was an old man wearing a red checkered shirt and a gray woolen coat. 10 minutes later, inside the house, "Young men, time is running out." The strange German man held a sharp knife and stood in front of the sofa with his back to the light. He said with a serious expression, "This is your last chance today." As he said this, he leaned over and cut open a piece of fruit pie on the coffee table. "Come and taste the piping hot pie I made myself." As he spoke, he placed a slice of pie on the opposite side of the coffee table. At this time, Xiao Tan, Horace, and Sean were already sitting side by side on the sofa. Horace took the pie from the old man with a silly smile and turned to look at the two people next to him. His expression seemed to say, "I didn't expect to encounter such a good thing." Okay, where were we? After the strange German man finished cutting the pie, he returned to his seat and put on his reading glasses. He faced the children, picked up the book, and said, "Oh, here it is." The amulet itself is not big, but there are mysterious spells engraved on it. As he translated, he seemed to have discovered something. He immediately turned the book around and showed the page to Xiao Tan and the others. "This thing looks quite strange, doesn't it?" Xiao Tan looked and saw a hand-drawn diagram on the page. As a whole, the pattern looked like two mini dragons, similar in appearance to the dragons in Western mythology, but not Easter dragons, one on the left and one on the right, one high and one low, clinging to an oval-shaped boulder of a different color. Of course, If Fong Bujue were to observe, he might be able to see that Van Helsing had used a quill instead of a pen when drawing this diagram. And from the ink, he could infer that the other party had been in a hurry when drawing the diagram. He might also be able to infer the true appearance of the amulet from this poorly drawn diagram. But at this moment, Brother Ju was not there, and no one would care about these details. Is this the amulet? Schouten looked at the diagram and wondered. I think so, the strange German man replied. Hey guys. Horace lowered his voice and said excitedly to the two friends beside him, the strange German man is amazing. The old man who was called the strange German man glanced at the children and said with a subtle expression, My name is Leonardo Cimino. Mr. Cimino, Sean asked about the part of balance. Can you explain it in detail? I don't understand. Okay, Cimino responded. According to this book, the forces of good and evil will constantly fluctuate and change with each other. And every 100 years, at a certain point in time, these two forces will reach a perfect balance. He paused for 2 seconds, and the amulet we were talking about just now gathers the forces of good. It's a holy relic for exorcism. Not only can it resist evil, but it's indestructible. He pointed at the page with his finger. Here, the word indestructible is used, and there's a horizontal line at the bottom. At this point, he turned a page and continued reading. And on the resurrection night that occurs once every 100 years, when the clock strikes midnight, the amulet will become especially fragile. During this period of time, it will become destructible. What happens if the amulet is destroyed? Sean asked. Then the balance between good and evil will be broken, Cimino replied. Evil will become the new order of this world. He raised his head and glanced at the children. But our friend Mr. Van Helsing said, even on the resurrection night, there's at least one way to stop the forces of darkness. What is it? Schouten quickly asked. If someone can get the amulet before the forces of darkness, they can use a ritual that can only be held once every 100 years to open the door to Borderland Prison, Cimino replied. It's like a terrifying whirlpool, a ferocious tornado that can swallow the forces of darkness and everything around it, and maintain peace for an entire century. Xiao Tan and the two children from the Monster Club listened to Cimino's description with rapt attention. Even Horace put down the pie in his hand. Did he describe the process of the ritual? Schouten quickly asked. Yes, and it's very detailed, Cimino replied. This diary lasted until the last day of his battle with the dark forces. What's interesting is, looking at the date, there's less than 12 hours left, which is midnight. We're exactly 100 years away from that day. 1:40 p.m. in the suburbs. No one knew what the structure of this planet, which resembled America in the 1980s, was. Not far from the city, there was a swamp shrouded in thick fog. Although it was only a 30-minute drive from the city, the landscape here was comparable to a primeval forest. It's around here. You can smell it, right? Dracula traversed the muddy ground with his graceful, unhurried stride. A werewolf in a tattered jacket and jeans followed behind Dracula and responded with a few howls that sounded like a wolf but not a wolf, or a gorilla but not a gorilla. Foo-foo, foo-foo. Just as their conversation ended, there was the sound of something being dragged not far away. Dracula and the werewolf turned around and saw a mummy. Dracula smiled and did not say anything. He also knew that there was nothing to say to the mummy. The mummy was obviously not good at communicating. In short, the mummy and the werewolf seemed to have tacitly acknowledged their status as followers and naturally followed behind Dracula. Dracula, on the other hand, did not mind and led the other two to move forward together. As they walked, they came to a deep and vast swamp. It's here. Dracula stood by the swamp and said in a low voice. After he finished speaking, silence descended. A moment later, in the middle of the swamp, it was as if it was boiling. A large number of mud bubbles emerged. Rip, rip. A few seconds later, accompanied by a rhythmic, eerie sound of footsteps, a large rectangular wooden box floated out of the swamp. Immediately after, a figure covered in mud appeared. This person held the box up high with both hands and walked out from the bottom of the swamp. After walking ashore, the mud on his body quickly faded away, revealing his true appearance. Generally speaking, he was a fish spirit, according to the end credits of Monster Subduing Squad. This monster's name was Gilman, which could be translated as Gillman. His face was like the combination of Murky and Babwa. Both of them were small demons in Journey to the West. His body looked similar to a human's, and he had distinct chest and abdominal muscles. His hands and feet were webbed in claws, and his whole body was covered with crocodile-like skin. This was another monster with low IQ. After he carried the big wooden box ashore, he looked at Dracula without saying a word, as if he was waiting for his boss's instructions. At this moment, in the sky above the thick fog, there was a faint thunder. Dracula once again squatted beside the big wooden box affectionately and handed his cane to the mummy, standing behind him. "I've waited for too long." Dracula slowly reached out and opened the lid of the wooden box. Too long. Looking at the count state, 9 out of 10 people would guess that the one lying in the wooden box was his old lover. However, after the lid was opened, a tall and strong man was revealed. Compared to the other 3 monsters, the one lying in the wooden box could be considered a famous Frankenstein. Frankenstein. Cain. Dracula stared at Frankenstein for a few seconds, then turned back and said to the mummy. The mummy immediately extended the cane in his hand and placed the tip of the cane in front of Dracula. The tip of the cane was a copper bat sculpture, the size of an apple, and the shape was lifelike. Dracula skillfully pulled out the 2 bat ears on the tip of the cane and pressed them on Frankenstein's 2 ears. He had no idea who had designed it for him. After the 2 parts were pulled out, 2 slender copper wires came out, and the 2 bat ears could be used as a clamp. "Wake up, my old friend." After Dracula was done, he took the cane, stood up, and said excitedly, "Our time has come." After saying that, he raised the end of the cane up high. After pressing a certain mechanism on the cane, a metal rod instantly popped out from the end of the cane, turning into a strange, erect lightning rod. On the other hand, in the community inside the sewer, the battle between Underworld Frontline and Blade Group had gone from the ground to the underground. It had changed from a sniping battle across the street to a surprise attack in a specific environment. Another trap. After the 6th explosion, Greedy Wolf's life points finally dropped below 20%. Just in case, he had to drink a large dose of life points recovery potion. Every trap is placed in a different way. Greedy Wolf thought, even though I know there's more than one strategist in Underworld Frontline than Phone Bujua, to be able to do this is impressive. Hey, you've been hit 6 times already. Are you sure you'll be fine? Defeating Armies, who was following behind his teammate, asked with concern, "How about I walk in front?" "Stop joking," Greedy Wolf replied. "If it was you, it wouldn't be a problem of being hit 6 times. You might have died 6 times already. You sure have guts." Defeating Armies pouted and replied in a non-committal tone, "I'm just telling the truth." Greedy Wolf replied seriously, "I've been maintaining a high degree of concentration to move forward. Furthermore, I have special equipment and a level S medic mastery to support me. If not for that, I would have died several times already." "Oh, it's just some traps, but they are so troublesome?" Defeating Armies asked. "Normally, it would be fine, but don't forget," Greedy Wolf replied, "our bodies have been shrunk. Under this condition, the equipment and summoning mastery will be more effective." He paused, and the most classic example of this is explosives. "If you're talking about explosives, I have mine as well," Defeating Armies said. "Since it's not worth it for us to chase after them, why should we take the initiative to attack? We can learn from them and set up traps along the way. Then won't we lose the advantage we gained on the ground earlier?" Greedy Wolf asked. "It took us a lot of effort to gain a certain degree of suppression and force them to escape underground. If we stop chasing and allow them to escape unscathed, won't all our efforts go to waste?" "Calm down," Defeating armies was indeed the man that Brother Jew had high hopes for. In this situation, his consideration of the problem was much more rational than Tan Lang, the strategist. Perhaps the enemy is using this mentality of yours to lure you to continue the chase and then increase the loss. After the captain's reminder, Greedy Wolf also understood. Wait a minute. You're right. His expression changed slightly. I seem to have unknowingly fallen into the mindset of a gambler. The so-called gambler's mindset was composed of many parts, and the two most typical parts were: 1. A small win was not a win, and a small win was a loss. 2. The more one lost, the more one had to increase the stakes so that they could recoup their losses. Yes, we can't chase after them anymore. At this moment, Greedy Wolf's mind buzzed, and many images flashed before his eyes. He quickly said to defeating armies, "It's not that I'm that smart, but those explosive traps, they are just tricks to distract us. The enemy's real goal is..." Boom! At this moment, an explosion interrupted his words. A huge tremor interfered with their footsteps. But Chapter 10:14. The walls on both sides of the sewer started to crumble, and a continuous shaking signaled the impending collapse. At that moment, defeating armies and Tan Lang's first reaction was the same. They had to run upward. "I'll do it!" In that second, when Pujun anxiously shouted. Before he even finished speaking, he had already taken out a black round object from his bag and flung it upwards. Beep beep. After 2 beeps, the black object was tossed to the top of the sewer. Then it disintegrated into a black dot, creating a collapsing field that had a diameter of 3 meters and lasted for 2 seconds. After the collapse, a circular hole that led to the ground appeared. Defeating armies and Tan Lang did not have time to think. They kicked off the ground at the same time, and before the hole closed, they both jumped out of the sewer. But what awaited them was, sure enough, they're out. A low male voice immediately entered their ears. Blade and Tan Lang were not to be trifled with. In that instant, they recognized that the person who spoke was Blood Corpse God. "Scatter!" The next second, Tan Lang shouted and spun his body in the air. Hearing that, defeating armies immediately cooperated with his teammate. The two of them stood on each other's feet in the air, and using each other's momentum, they leaped out in different directions. At that moment, they were at an indoor basketball court. As far as their eyes could see, there was only Blood Corpse God. Without knowing whether there were enemy players hiding in the dark, the two naturally chose to spread out and take a detour. "Considering that I don't have much time and that you guys are inettable," Blood Corpse God scratched his chin and said casually, "I won't play with you anymore." With that, he activated Fear Projection, and its force field instantly enveloped the entire basketball arena. Both defeating armies and Tan Lang's terror points shot up to 70% in an instant. The sudden change in their heart rate caused obvious discomfort to their childlike bodies. Both of their movements slowed down for a moment. "TSK, even though I was mentally prepared for this ability of his, there's nothing I can do about it," Defeating armies said with a pale face and cold sweat dripping down his face. "I've miscalculated. I've completely fallen into his trap." Tan Lang, on the other hand, was still in fear as he thought about his previous mistake. At this point, Tan Lang had already figured out that the explosive traps they encountered in the sewers were actually all bait. Because each trap was set up in a different way and was quite delicate, it made people subconsciously think that the purpose of these things was to kill, but in fact, it wasn't. When Xiao Ling set up those traps, she wanted to create the illusion of attempting to kill and give the enemy the illusion that the traps expose the route of the person being chased, thus luring the enemy to chase deeper. The fact that she could set up this trap meant that she had already calculated Greed's mindset from the very beginning. If Xiao Ling had only left behind traces of her escape, but not any threat or obstruction, Greed would have been suspicious, and he would have stopped chasing after her. On the other hand, if she had left behind some intricate and seemingly lethal traps along the route, Greed would have thought that was normal and would have ignored the further trap. "Yes, you have fallen into her trap." Blood Corpse God continued Tan Lang's words. "And you found out about it too late." He used his finger to point at the collapsed hole in the middle of the floor. The little girl's calculation is much deeper than you think. She has already imprinted the map of the entire residential area in her mind. Even underground, she knows her exact location. He paused and shrugged. She purposely led you to this part of the sewers because 1, there are fewer splits in this part of the sewers, and 2, the cement underneath the court is thick enough. Overall, there is a high chance that you will be buried alive. As he spoke, Blood Corpse God appeared behind defeating armies like a ghost. Even if she fails to bury you, there is still me as the last line of defense. Bang! The next second, following a muffled sound, defeating armies threw out a baton to block Blood Corpse God's knife hand. Immediately after, a series of pie-pie-pa-pa sounds of bones exploding could be heard. After defeating armies reacted, he was sent flying like a baseball. When he was still flying through the air, more than 10 of his bones had cracked. His fighting mastery was so, theoretically speaking, he should not have been beaten up so badly by Blood Corpse God. However, the body of a child was indeed hard to bear. Combined with the effect of fear projection, it was already quite impressive that he was able to survive. Seeing that his captain's life was in danger, Greed did not hesitate to use his skill. Name: Surge of Healing Skill Card Attribute. Active, permanent skill type. Medic effect: recover 40% of any character's health points, effective distance. 0 to 40 meters, casting time. 2 seconds, cooldown. 5 minutes, cannot be used on oneself. Consumption: 120 sorcery energy, prerequisite. Medic remark: when the shamans use their healing abilities to save others. Who will save the shamans? Normally speaking, this skill needed 2 seconds to cast, but Greed, who had a grade S medic mastery, did not need those 2 seconds. He could instantly cast all the magic medic skills without chanting. Therefore, when he shouted, a green healing energy had already appeared on defeating army's body. Unfortunately, even though he had cast the skill in time, the effect of the skill weakened as his body shrunk. The Surge of Healing, which could recover 40% of his health points, only recovered 20% of defeating army's life points. Furthermore, after his health points recovered, defeating armies immediately slammed into the wall below the stage, and he was injured again. With so many factors at his back, defeating armies still could not escape death. Humph! A trapped beast. The Blood Corpse God saw one of the players disintegrate into white light. He scoffed, and then turned to charge at Greed. This is bad. My terror points are still rising. I can't even move my legs. At that moment, Greed's body was shaking uncontrollably. He forced himself to calm down and thought to himself, strength, speed. I'm too weak compared to him. Even defeating armies was killed instantly. I won't be able to survive even one hit. What should I do? What should I do? The Blood Corpse God was not going to hold back. Just like when he killed defeating armies, the Blood Corpse God charged at Greed and landed a knee strike on the man who looked like a 10-year-old child. However, just as Greed had given up hope, a sudden change occurred. In that split second, there was a flash of white light, and the Blood Corpse God body dissolved into a ray of light and disappeared. Greedy Wolf, who had fallen to the ground out of instinct, only regained his senses after 10 seconds. He chuckled dully and muttered, "Hee hee, so that's how it is. Summoning skills are affected as well." Chapter 10:15. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the weather suddenly changed. The sunny sky in the morning was now covered with faint thunderclouds. The heavy clouds seemed to make the night come in advance. Except for the lightning that occasionally cut through the sky, there was almost no natural light. In such weather, an ambulance appeared in front of the old house on Dark Creek Road. After the car came to a stop, 5 figures got out of the car one after another. They were Dracula, Frankenstein, the werewolf, the mummy, and the Gillman. These 5 monsters had one thing in common, and that was that they rarely spoke. Even Dracula, who looked the most like a human among them, was a man of few words. Because of this, when these guys acted together, there was always an indescribable, eerie atmosphere. When Dracula walked to the door of the old house, he found a broken door panel, and his face immediately became a little gloomy. However, he still did not say anything. He just silently pushed the door open and walked into the house. The four followers behind him also followed the footsteps of their master and entered through the front door. There were many candlestick-shaped wall lamps on the walls of this old house. Because there was no electricity, these lights could not be turned on. However, the moment Dracula stepped into this old house, all the lights in the house instantly lit up. Dracula looked down at the footprints on the floor with the help of the light. After a moment of hesitation, he continued to follow the footsteps. In this old house, it was difficult to move without leaving a trace because there was a thick layer of dust everywhere. Even a mouse would leave a row of paw prints in a certain period of time. It seems that an exorcist has been here. Dracula walked all the way to the depths of the old house, stopped in front of a statue on the wall, and said, "There are two people in total. One of them has very small feet, maybe a dwarf, and the other has 2 rows of footprints back and forth. Maybe they've already left the house." He paused. They went straight here as soon as they entered the house, and as he spoke, Dracula stretched out his hand and pulled the right arm of the statue. Whoosh! A second later, the sound of stone rubbing against metal came from behind the statue, and a secret door opened, revealing a secret passage that extended downwards. Moreover, they seem to know where the secret door is. They directly pulled the switch and entered the hall, Dracula said as he turned around and made eye contact with his 4 companions. After a strange silence, the 5 of them seemed to have reached a consensus and entered the secret door together. This secret passage was connected to a row of stone steps that spiraled downwards. The underground space of the old house was quite large, perhaps even larger than the surface area of the house. And at the end of the stone steps was the auditorium where Van Helsing and the others held this ceremony in the opening cinematic of the movie. "You're finally here." When a monster stepped into the auditorium, a child's voice sounded. Dracula looked up and saw a child who looked only about 10 years old, wearing a long purple suit. At this moment, Brother Jew was sitting on a rock, playing with the holy amulet, and saying to the monsters in a leisurely tone, "I'm getting impatient. You." After seeing Fong Bujua's appearance, Dracula's expression changed. "Are you an exorcist?" "I can be." Brother Jew gave an answer that deserved a beating. "Or not. It seems that the 20th century is crazier than I thought." Dracula looked at the child in front of him and said, "Even a child can become an exorcist." Although Fong Bujua did not respond to the other party's question, Dracula had already made his own inference. Based on his past experience, ordinary children and even adults would either cry or scream when they saw him and the 4 brothers behind him. They might even faint on the spot. However, Fong Bujua was as calm as ever. He even took the initiative to say a few words. This behavior made Dracula firmly believe that Brother Jew was an exorcist. "Whether I'm an exorcist or not depends on your choice," Fong Bujua said. "If you don't cooperate, then I'll be the cruelest, most efficient, and most ruthless exorcist you've ever seen." He paused for half a second and showed an evil smile. "And if you're willing to cooperate, we'll be on the same side." "On the same side?" Dracula was stunned. He took 2 seconds to organize his thoughts and said, "Do you know what you're talking about?" "Child." "It doesn't mean that I'm a child just because I look like one." Fong Bujua tilted his head and signaled to the people behind Dracula with his eyes. "If everything can be judged by appearance, are you a zoo manager or a circus animal trainer?" The werewolf seemed to have heard the sarcasm in this sentence. He immediately took half a step forward and roared at Brother Jew. However, Dracula immediately raised his arm to stop the werewolf. He straightened his face and looked at Brother Jew again, then asked, "What do you mean by cooperation?" "It's very simple," Fong Bujua replied. "I want to ask you to help me kill a few enemies." He straightforwardly stated his conditions. "After the matter is done, I promise, I'll destroy this holy amulet for you." "What if I don't agree?" Dracula said as he quietly took a few steps forward. "Then I'll use the amulet to kill all of you now," Fong Bujua said arrogantly. "Something that even Van Helsing couldn't do with a little brat like you." Dracula said as he approached. He was already within 5 steps of Brother Jew. Van Helsing doesn't have this thing in my hand. Fong Bujua interrupted him and took out the sinister blade from his backpack. His small hands skillfully buckled and placed the amulet in the leather pocket of the slingshot. Then he raised his hand and aimed at Dracula in front of him. You? What? What is that? When Dracula saw this sinister blade, it was as if he had seen a cross. He instinctively covered his face with his arms and took a few steps back. After all, this vampire count was also the leader of the villains in this script. Putting aside his strength, at least he knew how terrifying the weapon he was facing was. Very good. Fong Bujua was very satisfied with Dracula's reaction. He laughed. It seems that you know very well what will happen if I use this slingshot to fire the amulet. This saves me a lot of talking. Long story short, half an hour ago, I sent a follower to look for Van Helsing's diary. As for the amulet, as you can see, it's in my hand. As Brother Jew spoke, he stood up and looked directly into the Count's eyes. Work with me, Dracula. This is a win-win deal. His demeanor and words seem to be more bewitching. The key elements of the Night of Resurrection are already in my hands. You have no reason to refuse me, in capital. Chapter 10:16. It was 3 p.m. at the parking lot outside the community shopping center. It was the peak shopping hour. There were many cars in the parking lot, and there were many people entering and exiting the shopping center. And in this crowd, there was a resolute child about 7 meters tall who seemed to be searching for something. Strange. Where is he? Brother Long arrived at the rendezvous point on time, but he looked around and did not see 7 kills. Is it because he is too short that I missed him? He mumbled to himself as he wandered around the parking lot, looking around. Suddenly, hey, we're here. Someone lowered his voice to shout at Long Almin. Brother Long recognized the voice as his teammate, but when he turned to look, he did not see the person who spoke. We're here, the voice repeated urgently. Only then did Brother Long realize that the voice came from under a car. Therefore, Long Almin walked to the car and squatted down to look inside. I say, are you two playing hide-and-seek? In a way, 7 kills narrowed his eyes. That's right, Tan Lang, who was lying next to him, added, of course, if we were really playing hide-and-seek with your current physique, you would definitely think that we're ghosts. Although you guys are sincerely lying there and talking nonsense with me, I have no interest in coming down to accompany you guys. Brother Long's lips twitched as he replied. So, can you explain the current situation? Isn't the situation obvious? Tan Lang was about to start when he heard, side quest progress updated. The system announcement rang. The next second, the 3 of them instinctively opened the game menu. They glanced at the quest tab and realized that the quest Find a Way to Meet Up with Your Teammates had been crossed out, and there was a new quest below it. Enter Dracula's Castle. Oh well. 2 seconds later, Tan Lang said, even though our team leader is dead, Underworld Frontline has exhausted the super powerful summon, Blood Zombie God. Furthermore, the difficulty of our side quest has decreased as the number of people has decreased. I have no idea what you're talking about. Brother Long looked at him and said, can you get out from underneath the car and start from the beginning? In the next 5 minutes, Greed Wolf, 7 kills, and Long Almin squatted next to the car and communicated with each other surreptitiously. Tan Lang told 7 kills about what happened to him and defeating armies. After that, 7 kills followed the sound of the explosion to the basketball court and met Tan Lang, who had escaped death. In conclusion, Tan Lang concluded, we know that, in this scenario, even summoning and machine-type abilities will be affected. The summoned creatures don't seem to have been weakened, but their duration has been reduced by at least half. In addition, the effects of our weapons, armors, items, and so on will also be reduced. I understand about summoning creatures, Brother Long said after some thought. If not for the fact that the lifespan of the bloody corpse god has been greatly reduced, you would have been dead already. He paused. However, the abilities of the machinery class and the special effects of the items will be weakened. How did you know that? Before encountering the blood corpse god, I drank a large amount of life points supplement. At the time, my life points were back to full, so I didn't pay it much attention. Tan Lang explained without hesitation. However, when defeating armies tossed out the singularity grenade, I felt something was wrong. The effective radius of the grenade was obviously smaller than usual. However, the situation at the time did not allow me to study this in detail. He used his finger to point at the backpack that was slung over his body. After the battle, when I used the special item to recover my spiritual energy, I confirmed that even the effect of the item was influenced by the scenario. Oh, I see. Long Aomi nodded. After a moment's silence, he rearranged and digested the information that he had. At that moment, "Hey kids, what are you doing next to my car?" A man's voice rang out. "Trying to prank me?" The three of them turned their heads in the direction of the voice and saw a 35-year-old man in a suit and leather shoes, holding shopping bags. "Get out of my way, you little B*****stards." When the man in the suit placed the shopping bag into the back seat, he was already using vulgarities to chase the three from Blade Edge away. Tan Lang raised his head to study the man and said, "Sir, this seems to be a parking spot for the disabled." "So what?" The man in the suit took 2 steps forward and used a condescending gaze and a hand gesture to stop them. "Mind your own business. I'm going to park right here. What are you going to do about it?" Before he finished, Long Aomin stood up. Even though the man in the suit was 1.7 meters tall, slightly taller than Brother Long, Brother Long's face was more than enough to make up for the 15 centimeters difference in height. "What are you doing? Kid, I advise you to stop looking for trouble." The man in the suit was still trying to intimidate the 3 children in front of him by snorting and glaring at them. "Looking for trouble?" Long Aomin repeated that word in a meaningful tone. Then he laughed coldly. "Humph. I'm sorry, but I'm a police officer." 15 minutes later, on a road that led to Dark Creek Road, a Volvo that still had more than 10 years of debt was driving down the road. Tan Lang and 7 Kills sat in the back seat, enjoying the air conditioning and munching on the snacks that had been placed on the shelves of the shopping mall not long ago. Long Aomin, on the other hand, sat in the passenger seat with his arms crossed and his face looking straight ahead with a serious expression. "I'm warning you, my uncle's husband is a lawyer." As the man in the suit drove, he tried to use his words to control the situation. "If you get out of the car now, I can pretend that nothing happened, or else, listen to me, you be ***starred. Long Aomin slapped the man across the face and interrupted him without turning around. "I'm warning you as well. The few of us hate scum like you who pollute society the most. If you don't shut up, I'll make sure you have the right to use the parking spot for the rest of your life. At 4 p.m., somewhere in the neighborhood." "Huh, I've finally run into you." Xiao Tan, who was walking down the street with 4 boys, ran into Xiao Ling and Ruo Yu. The 4 kids were all members of the Monster Club. Other than Sean and Horace, the other 2 were also teenagers. Oh. Before the 2 players could reply, Xiao In and the rest turned their heads around in unison and gave Xiao Tan 3 consecutive exclamations. "Buddy, are you sure you're not mistaken? You want to play with the girls?" Xiao Tan was an honest person. He did not think that there was anything wrong with that. So he replied, "Yes, we often play together." "What?" The boys were shocked. "Okay, looks like there's a big misunderstanding here. Wong, I'm sorry, but I think you have to leave our club. We don't interact with girls, and we don't play with those kids who interact with girls." Didn't you notice the words "No girls" written at the entrance of the treehouse? They talked one after another and backed away from Xiao Tan. Huh. Xiao Tan saw this and still did not react. After a few seconds, he said again, "Huh." At this time, Xiao Ling had walked to Xiao Tan's side and shook her head as she muttered, "Don't, huh? Even I know, most boys' attitudes towards girls before junior high are very unfriendly." "Is there such a thing?" Xiao Tan replied with a puzzled expression. "You really don't know?" Xiao Ling asked suspiciously. "Yeah," Xiao Tan replied. "Actually, I didn't have a good relationship with boys and girls when I was young. The only one who got along well with me was, you were careless in making friends. Your childhood is ruined. My condolences." Ruo Yu, who was standing on the other side, did not wait for him to finish speaking and had already given an irrefutable conclusion. Wang, it seems that you have a lot to talk about with the girls. We won't keep you company, Sean, who had already retreated a few meters, said. When you cut ties with the girls, maybe you can join our club, Horace continued. The few of them talked, bypassed the 3 players, and left on their own. When they were far away, Xiao Ling asked, Okay, back to the topic. Have you made any progress in the past 6 hours? Yes. Xiao Tan immediately replied. I found someone to translate Van Helsing's diary. As he spoke, he took out a piece of paper from his inventory. I also copied down the part of the spell with the phonetic transcription. He looked quite proud. Next, we just need to find a virgin to complete the ceremony in the opening cinematic. Speaking of this, he seemed to have thought of something. By the way, do you count as a virgin now? He rubbed his chin and said, Logically speaking, you were a virgin before you met me. But then you weren't. But if you were 10 years old, bang. A gunshot was heard, and a white light flashed. Xiao Ling pulled out the gun, aimed, and fired. The whole process was done in one breath. Within a second, the bullet from the pistol neatly pierced through Xiao Tan's temple. It was a headshot. I got the spell. Xiao Ling took the paper from the corpse's hand with a sinister expression. I also got rid of an idiot for the world. How delightful. This scene caused all the spectators to fall into a state of short-circuiting. There was no doubt that this was the first intentional killing of a teammate since the start of tournament for the best S2, although there had been cases of accidental injury or even accidental death before, mostly caused by indiscriminate skills. This kind of intentional killing, not to mention the motive of the perpetrator. If it were someone else, they would not have been able to do it even if they wanted to. Technically speaking, Xiao Ling should not have been able to launch a deliberate attack on her teammates, but she did it at this moment. Then, according to the established facts, there were only 2 hypotheses that could be made. First, the person who fired the shot was not Xiao Ling, but someone else in disguise. Second, Xiao Ling had used some method to break through the domain of Transcendence Domain, thus achieving this kill. At the same time, in the treehouse of the Monster Club. That little bastard. Wait until I get this chip out. I'll teach you a lesson. Homeless Hill hammered the entrance of the treehouse with his elbow while cursing Brother Jew. Of course, he did not dare to neglect the matter in front of him because before he left the treehouse on Dark Creek Road, Feng Bujua said a dozen delayed trigger words to him. What was a delayed trigger word? Brother Jew's explanation was that there would be no reaction when you heard it, but after a certain period of time, the chip's effect would be triggered. At first, Hill did not believe that there was such a nonsensical high-tech, but Feng Bujua immediately said, Actually, 20 minutes ago, I already said a delayed trigger word to you. Calculating the time, it's about time for it to take effect. As soon as he finished speaking, Hill fell to the ground in pain as if he had been electrocuted. After getting up from the ground, Hill had no choice but to believe it. Later, Feng Bujua gave Hill some specific clues to find the location of Van Helsing's diary and told him, If you don't return in 4 hours, these delayed trigger words will torture you until you go into shock. After that, he said dermatitis a dozen times in a row, and then said, If you successfully come back with the diary, I'll immediately remove the chip for you. And so, this is what we are witnessing right now. Damn it. Damn it. Hill slammed his elbow on the wooden board at the entrance of the treehouse, as if the board was Feng Bujua's face. When his arm began to feel numb, the lock at the entrance finally collapsed. TSK, a kid's treehouse, and it's so tightly locked. Hill shook his arm and complained. Then he stuck his head out and climbed into the treehouse. He was very lucky. Van Helsing's diary was here. Because the book itself was relatively large and heavy, and the children could not directly understand the German on it, they did not carry it with them. Instead, they placed it in the treehouse. According to Brother Jew's description, Hill quickly found the diary on a low table in the corner of the treehouse. What the hell is this? Out of curiosity, Hill opened it to take a look. Unfortunately, he was not even as good as a child. He could not even tell which country the words in the diary were from. The only things he could understand were some illustrations. It's a mess. Hill quickly lost his patience. He muttered softly and was ready to leave the treehouse. However, just as he turned around, a cunning thought flashed through his mind and made him think of a plan. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.